Chapter 637. Su Qingsang was pregnant. Xiang Kaiping had been taking good care of her during this period of time, and she had become more plump. After talking things out with Li Qianxue, he looked much better. Hua Jinyao now regarded her as an important person to take care of and protect. Whenever she went out, someone had to follow her. As long as he was at home, he would always be by her side. At that moment, Su Qingsang only frowned slightly, and he immediately brought her a glass of warm water. They did not care that there were other elders and relatives in the living room. Nian Chuanya could only feel that her gums were dry and stiff. Her son had been living a good life, but Hua Jinyao just couldn't let go of such a small matter. What about now? The two of them were so happy. Her son was still in prison. Hua Jinyao just needed to get him in. Old Master Hua was also so biased that he didn't take Hua Yifan's side at all. Nian Chuanya's expression was very ugly. If there weren't so many relatives present, she would have jumped up, pointed at Hua Jinyao's nose and scolded him. Hua Manzi sat next to her and pinched her arm. She came close to him, and her voice was very light. "Mom, calm down." "Calm down? How could he calm down?" Ever since Hua Yifan's accident, she had been unwilling to appear in this house. After all, Hua Mingguang's family was grandfather Hua's closest family. Their family was nothing, right? Nian Chuanya had come from a humble family to begin with. She didn't have any foresight. To her, her husband and son were the most important. She didn't care about the family's honor. Now her son was in jail because of Hua Jinyao, but Hua Jinyao seemed to have become a winner in life. He had everything he wanted, which was very difficult for her to accept. Especially after seeing Hua Yifan, the contrast was even more obvious. Look, it's a holiday now, but they're all so lively here. What about Hua Yifan? He was alone in that cold prison. He had no family, no freedom. Nian Chuanya's heart was filled with hatred, and she exerted more force. Hua Manzi unclasped her fingers little by little, and gently stretched them out. "Manzi, a little impatience spoils great plans." Hua Manzi's voice was very soft. "The future is long, and now is the time for them to show off. It's not suitable to go against them." Nian Chuanya knew this was the truth, but she couldn't help it. "Do you have a plan?" "No." Hua Manzi glanced in Su Qingsang's direction. Li Qianxue was also here today. Ever since Su Qingsang was pregnant, Lu Tongjia's attitude toward her had changed. Before, they could see Lu Tongjia making things difficult for Su Qingsang. But now Lu Tongjia and Su Qingsang were like mother and daughter. The better they lived, the worse Hua Manzi felt. Her emotions were the same as Nian Chuanya's. However, she was smarter than Nian Chuanya in that she wasn't in a hurry to do anything. There would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Old Master Hua had been in a good mood recently. Su Qingsang was pregnant with twins. There were quite a few great-grandfathers around his age, but there weren't many great-grandfathers who could be twins. At a time like this, how could Hua Manzi, who knew how to judge the situation, offend grandfather Hua? Su Qingsang didn't notice the look in Hua Mingliang's eyes at all. She was listening to Lu Tongjia and Li Qianxue talk about their pregnancies. It seemed that all mothers had this habit. Once they found out that someone around them was pregnant, they couldn't wait to repeat the symptoms of their pregnancy at that time. She was a doctor herself. In fact, these symptoms were very clear as early as when she was in school. However, everyone's reaction was different. She found it quite interesting to listen to them. Old Master Hua was in a good mood, and chatted with Hua Yangyuan and Hua Yangxiu. When he saw Uncle Cheng enter the door, he stood up with a smile. "The last guest is here. We can start eating." Everyone present looked in the direction of the door, because of Old Master Hua's words. The others' expressions didn't change, but Li Qianxue's face suddenly darkened. She didn't expect Old Master Hua to invite Su Chenghui. "Chenghui is here. Come and sit down." "Old Master." Su Chenghui came to Rong City for business. After finishing his business, he deliberately chose a long time to visit Old Master Hua. Old Master Hua knew that he was also in Rong City, so he called him to the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet today. "I'm late. I'm sorry." Su Chenghui handed over the gift in his hand as he spoke. Old Master Hua didn't open the gift. He just glanced at Uncle Cheng and asked him to take it. He looked at Su Chenghui with a faint smile in his eyes. "It's good that you're here." Don't do these things next time. It's just a little plaything. I'm glad that you don't mind. Li Qianxue sat there. The cheerful appearance of talking with Lu Tongjia just now was completely gone. She sat there with a cold face and looked at Su Qinghui with undisguised disdain. However, there were too many people from the Hua family today. They were all relatives of the Hua family. No matter how reluctant she was, she couldn't directly embarrass Su Qinghui. She could only watch as Su Qinghui sat down next to her and squeezed into the seat between her and Qingsang. Qianxue. Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianxue. She was still very beautiful today. She had always been the focus of the crowd. No matter where he was, he could recognize Li Qianxue at a glance. I thought I was going to pick you up. I didn't expect you to come with Qingsang. Li Qianxue completely ignored Su Qinghui's words. Her heart had already turned cold, so she naturally wouldn't pay attention to Su Qinghui. Let's go together later, Su Qinghui said quite casually, as if they were still husband and wife and hadn't divorced yet. Li Qianxue didn't want to tacitly agree to such a thing. Just as she was about to refute, Old Master Hua had already received Aunt Zhou's instructions and could start the banquet. Let's go. Let's eat. Today is a good day. I'm happy, so I want to drink a few more glasses. Grandpa, even if you're happy, you should drink less. Your blood pressure can't drink too much. Su Qingsang's timely concern made Old Master Hua laugh. He waved his hand and said, Let's not worry about blood pressure today. I'm happy anyway. Let's go. Let's eat. After being interrupted like this, Li Qianxue didn't have a chance to speak at all. Not only that, after they entered the restaurant, Li Qianxue found that her seat was actually arranged with Su Qinghui's. This made her expression even more unpleasant. She couldn't help but look in Su Qingsang's direction, wanting her to come over and change seats with her. However, today Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui came as in-laws. In order to show that they were biological relatives, Old Master Hua arranged Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue's seats next to him. On the other side of him sat Hua Yangyuan and his wife, Hua Yangxiu and his wife. Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang were further down. In this way, Li Qianxue couldn't even change seats, because that would be too much of a movement, and it would make a joke of herself. It wasn't that Su Qingsang didn't see Li Qianxue's pleading eyes, but she couldn't help her for the time being. Su Qingsang heard Zhang Yichen's name when Old Master Hua was talking to Hua Yangxiu and his wife. Hua Yangxiu was full of helplessness when she talked about her youngest son. Some time ago, Zhang Yichen volunteered to be an instructor at a newly established base. It was estimated that he wouldn't be back for 2 or 3 years. I don't know what's wrong with him. It's said that he trains for more than 10 hours every day. Those new soldiers are miserable under his training. What nonsense are you talking about? Zhang Xinghua glanced at her disapprovingly. It's a good thing that our son is ambitious. If those people can't endure it, they will naturally be eliminated. If they can endure it and make a name for themselves, they are the talents we need. Yes, you're right. I'm just worried about my own son, okay? Su Qingsang turned her face at the right time and looked at the piece of fish that Hua Jinyao put into her bowl. It's very tender. Try it. Okay. She still felt a little nauseous these days, but at least she didn't throw up anymore. She also knew that as the months went on, it would be more and more torturous. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's eyes. It seemed that she didn't hear what Hua Yangxiu said at all. He didn't expect Zhang Yichen to go so far away, but it was good. He believed that when Zhang Yichen came back, his child would be born. By then, maybe he would already have a woman he liked. Su Qinghui saw what Hua Jinyao was doing and put a piece of fish into Li Qianxue's bowl. Li Qianxue looked at the piece of fish and resisted the urge to pick it up and throw it at Su Qinghui's face. She gritted her teeth and glared at Su Qinghui with a warning look. Su Qinghui acted as if he didn't see it and put another shrimp into her bowl. This shrimp is good. Try it. I have hands. There were other members of the Hua family around her. Li Qianxue didn't want to lose her composure, and she couldn't. She lowered her voice and the warning look in her eyes became more and more obvious. I can eat it myself. I know you have hands, but I just want to pick up food for you. Can't I? Su Qinghui found that he was really smart. He knew to visit Old Master Hua a few days ago, It was such a rare opportunity today. God knew that he hadn't eaten with Li Qianxue since the divorce. He thought that he was affectionate, but Li Qianxue almost wanted to throw up. She couldn't pick up the food in her bowl and throw it at Su Qinghui's face. She could only force herself to ignore it. When Su Qinghui put the food in her bowl for the third time, she clenched the chopsticks in her palm. Su Qinghui, that's enough. She leaned close to his ear, and her low voice couldn't hide her anger at this time. Don't think that I won't fall out with you. Su Qinghui showed a rare faint smile. He turned his face and looked at the anger in Li Qianxue's eyes. Look at the woman he liked. She was so beautiful even when she was angry. If I remember correctly, you've already fallen out with me. Li Qianxue's face was red, but she couldn't lose her temper. Su Qinghui stopped when he was ahead, and finally stopped picking up food for her. This meal was very uncomfortable for Li Qianxue. However, Old Master Hu turned his head to talk to her from time to time, and asked about Old Master Li's situation. Li Qianxue could only cheer up and answer. Su Qinghui also said a few words on the side. Obviously, Old Master Hu thought that they were going to get married again. They were young people. They quarreled and reconciled. Wasn't that how life was? Those who knew the inside story thought that the two of them were going to get married again. Those who didn't know the inside story always thought that they were a loving couple. Li Qianxue didn't have the chance to explain at all. Soon, someone held a glass of wine and toasted the two of them. After all, they were in-laws of the Hu family. Seeing Old Master Hu's attitude, when other people came to toast, they all toasted Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui. This made Li Qianxue more and more uncomfortable. When it was almost time to end, she told Su Qingsang that she wasn't feeling well and had to go back to rest. Why go back? If you're tired, just rest here. Old Master Hu waved his hand and directly made the decision for them. There are many guest rooms anyway. Tongjia, have you arranged everything? Don't worry, Dad, everything has been arranged. Lu Tongjia was a qualified mistress of the Hu family. These small things were nothing to her. Li Qianxue wanted to refuse, but Lu Tongjia had already taken her upstairs to the guest room. If you drink too much, go up and rest for a while. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival, and we still have to admire the moon at night. You can rest for a while. Later, we'll go to the garden in the back together. I have a few datura flowers that are blooming well. There are also new chrysanthemums. The first batch has also bloomed. We can admire the moon and chrysanthemums later. Li Qianxue couldn't refuse. After entering the door, she had to rest for a while. She was woken up by the ringtone when she was in a daze. When she opened her eyes and saw Su Yusin's name displayed on the screen, she answered the video call from him without hesitation. Mom, happy Mid-Autumn Festival. This time, Old Master Li went to spend the Mid-Autumn Festival with Su Yusin, so Li Qianxue came to Rong City to accompany Su Qingsang. It was the first time Su Yusin had left home, and the first time he hadn't spent the Mid-Autumn Festival with Li Qianxue. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Li Qianxue was in a daze, and didn't know what time it was. She sat up. Her voice was a little hoarse after drinking a little. She was about to get up to find a glass of water. There was really a glass of water in front of her. Li Qianxue took it and drank half of it, before she realized that the glass of water was actually brought over by Su Qinghui. At the same time, Su Qinghui's figure appeared on Su Yusin's screen. The person on the other side of the screen could see everything clearly. Dad, when Su Yusin saw Su Qinghui's figure, he was stunned. What was going on? Why was Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue together? The two of them were in the same room, and looking at Li Qianxue, it was obvious that she had just woken up. Su Yusin was no longer that naive boy who didn't know anything. He knew what it meant for a woman to wake up in bed with a man next to her. Yusin, happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Compared with Li Qianxue's stunned expression, Su Qinghui seemed much calmer. Are you alone? No, with Grandpa. Old Master Li was sitting behind Su Yusin, so he naturally saw Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui. Qianxue, Qinghui you. In such a situation, anyone would misunderstand. Dad, Yusin, it's not what you think. How could Li Qianxue let such a misunderstanding happen? She was anxious to explain. She was a little excited, and almost couldn't hold the glass in her hand. Su Qinghui took it in time and put it aside. Looking at it now, the two people on the other side of the screen were more likely to misunderstand. Then what is it? Su Yusin looked at Li Qinshua's hair, which was a little messy because of her sleep. Mom, are you going to remarry? No. Li Qianxue answered quickly. Who was going to remarry Su Chenghui? She hated him and couldn't wait to dislike him. Qianxue? Old Master Li wasn't blind just now. He saw clearly that his daughter wanted to drink water, and Su Chenghui poured water for her. It was obvious that they were very familiar with each other, and their coordination was very good. It was as if the two of them often did this. Li Qianxue said that she was going to Rong City to see Su Qingsang, but he didn't expect that she would go with Su Chenghui. It was really surprising. Dad, don't ask. It's really not what you think. I'll explain to you when I come back. After saying this, Li Qianxue looked at Su Yusin. Yusin, take good care of Grandpa. I'll fly to see you in 2 days. Okay. Su Yusin nodded. Li Qianxue quickly hung up the phone and turned to face Su Chenghui. She quickly changed her face, and her eyes were obviously angry. Why are you here? What do you think? Su Chenghui sat down next to her and watched as Li Qianshue's body moved back a lot because of his movements. This is the guest room of the Hua family, and we are husband and wife. Of course, they arranged for us to be in the same room. Who's husband and wife with you? Li Qianxue didn't accept this excuse. We're already divorced. It doesn't matter anymore. But they don't know. Then why don't you explain it clearly? Why should I explain? Su Chenghui's body leaned forward slightly. Seeing the dissatisfaction in Li Qianshue's eyes, he rarely showed his hooligan side. You don't know how happy I am to be misunderstood. Crazy. Li Qianxue pushed him away and quickly got off the bed from the other side. However, her shoes were placed on Su Chenghui's side. She wanted to leave without putting on her shoes. Su Chenghui saw it and quickly picked up the pair of shoes. He walked around the bed and stood in front of Li Qianxue. Put your shoes on. Put them down. Give me your feet. Su Chenghui reached out his hand to Li Qianxue and gestured for her to give him her feet. Are you going to help me put on my shoes? Li Qianxue took a step back. She didn't intend to cooperate with Su Chenghui at all. Qianxue? Su Chenghui. Li Qianxue looked at the shoes in his hand, and then at Su Chenghui's calm face. She sneered. Who are you pretending to be affectionate for? The guest room of the Hua family was covered with a thick carpet. She didn't feel cold even if she stepped on it. She just crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked at the man who was half squatting in front of her. He looked servile and humble. Do you know that every time you show such a look in front of me, I'm not very touched. Instead, I feel like vomiting? Su Chenghui looked at Li Qianxue and knew that she didn't have anything nice to say to him. He also knew that she wouldn't be polite to him. I'm not pretending. I'm serious. And then, Li Qianxue bent down and snatched the shoe from his hand without thinking. She couldn't bear it if he touched her things. I have to be grateful. Kneel down and thank you. Qianxue, that's not what I meant. Su Chenghui. Li Qianxue put on the shoe and bent down to put on the other shoe. After putting it on, she stood up straight and glared at Su Chenghui coldly. Have you forgotten? Once, when we went to a banquet, my shoe was accidentally stuck in a crack in the ground. I asked you to help me take my shoe. What did you say at that time? Su Chenghui didn't lose his memory. On the contrary, ever since he divorced Li Qianxue, the scenes of his life in the past 20 years became clearer and clearer. Of course, he remembered what she said. Li Qianxue saw his reaction and knew that he hadn't forgotten. It was good that he hadn't forgotten. You said, who do you think you are? Even if I'm the eldest daughter of the Li family, in your heart I'm nothing. You won't love me, and you won't have feelings for me. You told me not to expect you to help me take my shoe even once. You said that, right? Su Chenghui's expression finally changed a little. He maintained his squatting posture and didn't move at all. Li Qianxue didn't want to bring up the past. Some things were in the past. If Su Chenghui could stay away from her, she would never have said these words. There was another time when I excitedly bought a whole new set of clothes for you. Then, I went home and wanted you to try them on. When I put the pair of handmade leather shoes in front of you, you said, don't say it. Su Chenghui remembered. He hadn't forgotten. Even though that scene had happened more than 20 years ago, he hadn't forgotten it. He didn't let her say it, but Li Qianxue insisted. You said so I'm really that cheap? I'm even willing to do something like carrying your shoes. Unfortunately, in your heart, I'm not even worthy of carrying your shoes. Right? Don't say it. Qianxue, I beg you don't say it. Su Qinghui closed his eyes. He didn't want to listen anymore. Li Qianxue didn't want to recall it either. Those memories weren't good at all. After tearing apart the first layer of skin, all that was left were the ugly and embarrassing memories of devastation. Alright, if you don't want to say it, then don't say it. Anyway, I believe in your memory, and I won't let you lose your memory. Do you know? Yesterday, Qingseng asked me if I had forgiven you. She asked me if I hated you so much because you changed her and Su Peijian's identities. Do you know what I answered her? I told her, no, at least not completely. Knowing that you changed their identities was just the last straw that broke the camel's back for me. For more than 20 years, your sarcasm, indifference and sarcasm towards me have been stabbing me in the heart time and time again. Su Qinghui, it's been 26 years. From the moment I fell in love with you until now, I've spent more than 26 years on you. Now can I beg you? Can you be magnanimous and let me go? After all, I'm not young anymore. I'm no longer a little girl in her early 20s. I really don't have the energy to play this kind of game with you. I love you, but you don't love me anymore. I'm in my 40s and almost 50 years old. I can't afford to mess around. I don't want to mess around either. Please stay away from me in the future. Chapter 638. Here, Li Qianxue pointed to the position of her heart. Her voice was very soft, and there was determination in it. It used to be hot, and it used to be warm, but now it's cold, dead, and broken. There's nothing left. All of this is because of you, Su Qinghui. So don't think about what you can do to move me. Don't think about asking me to forgive you and give you a chance to start over, because I have no heart anymore. Su Qinghui couldn't speak. He lowered his head, and the part of his forehead that was covered by his hair blocked his eyes. His expression couldn't be seen. His body was extremely stiff, and he maintained a half-squatting posture without moving. Only his tightly clenched fists revealed some of his emotions. Li Qianxue didn't look at him. Some things were in the past. She didn't want to say it. She was proud. She had once put down her pride in front of Su Qinghui. She had made herself humble and ingratiating. She had once put down all her dignity to love Su Qinghui. She had loved him for 26 years. She had no self, no dignity, and even no bottom line. That wasn't her. It wasn't the real Li Qianxue. Now she refused to remember. She wanted to be herself. That proud, arrogant, and superior Li Qianxue. Forget it. Don't mention it. In the end, she still lost control. She wouldn't admit that Su Qinghui had the ability to make her lose control. She hoped that this would be the last time, and that it wouldn't happen again. Today, she really couldn't control herself, because she had drunk a little. She admitted that she had grievances in her heart, and it was a considerable amount of grievances. She did hate Su Qinghui, not only because he replaced Su Qingsang and Su Peijian's identities, but also because he didn't love her. What she hated the most was that he used her love to hurt her unscrupulously. He used her love for him as a weapon to hurt her. No one would be able to persevere if their sincerity was constantly betrayed and hurt. Those years were too difficult for her, and it was too painful. She didn't want that anymore. She slowed down her breathing and calmed herself down. She picked up her bag and left. She asked Su Qingsang to arrange a car to take her home. She would rather go back to Hu Jinyao's apartment and spend time with Su Qingsang than see Su Qinghui's face, which was pretending to be affectionate. The door opened and closed. Su Qinghui lost his strength and sat on the carpet. He didn't lose his memory. He remembered what Li Qianxue remembered. He knew everything he had said and done. Li Qianxue's words only made him understand once again that if he really wanted Li Qianxue to forgive him, it was a goal that would be difficult to achieve no matter how much effort he put in. Or perhaps he would never be able to make Li Qianxue forgive him in this lifetime. His eyes were a little sore and dry. Su Qinghui lowered his head and covered his eyes tightly. The sour feeling came from the regret and reluctance in his heart. He knew that Li Qinxue would not forgive him so easily. But what was he going to do? He really didn't want to let go. Li Qinxue didn't sleep well that night. Maybe it was because of the alcohol. Or maybe it was because of other reasons. She had a dream that night. The dreams that came one after another made her feel uncomfortable. She woke up after 6 o'clock. When she woke up, Li Qinxue couldn't sleep anymore. After thinking for a while, she went in the direction of the kitchen. For her, taking care of her daughter was much more important than being involved with Su Qinghui. Standing in front of the refrigerator, Li Qinxue stared at the food inside and was stunned for a moment. The last time she cooked seemed to be more than 20 years ago. At that time, she believed in the books that if she wanted to capture a man's heart, she had to capture his stomach first. Therefore, she specially bought a lot of recipes to study, from the 8 major cuisines to home-cooked side dishes to healthy soups. At that time, she spent a lot of effort on cooking. Unfortunately, perhaps because of her limited talent, the food she cooked could only be described as terrible. No matter how simple or homely the dishes were, they would all be ruined by her. After repeated attempts, and after several blisters appeared on her hands, she finally managed to cook something that was barely presentable. She happily brought it to Su Qinghui, but he didn't eat it at all, and even mocked her. He said Li Qinxue stopped thinking. Yesterday, she told herself not to think about it, but now she was still thinking about it. She shook her head and threw away all those messy thoughts. Now what she needed to think about was how to successfully make breakfast. Should she fry an egg and make an egg sandwich? That shouldn't be too difficult, right? She had all the ingredients. Ever since Su Qingseng got pregnant, she was afraid that she would want to eat something at any time. So the refrigerator at home was filled with ingredients. Li Qinxue first looked up the method on the internet, and then found all the ingredients. According to the instructions, she began to fry the eggs first. When Su Qingseng came out of the room, she smelled the hidden burning smell in the air. Because it was the Mid-Autumn Festival yesterday, she gave Auntie Yu the day off. Auntie Yu wouldn't come today. Could it be that Hu Jingyao was cooking? When she saw Li Qinxue standing in front of the kitchen counter and frying an egg, Su Qingseng felt that her eyeballs were about to fall out. Mom! Qingseng? Li Qinxue was embarrassed for a moment. She didn't expect her cooking skills to be so bad. It was just frying an egg. The steps on the internet were extremely simple. But, looking at the black eggs in the trash can, she felt a pang of guilt. They were of different degrees, but they were all black. Mom, are you making breakfast? Li Qinxue became more and more embarrassed. I wanted to make you an egg sandwich. Su Qingseng looked at her, and her heart felt as if it had been gently pricked by a needle at that moment. It didn't hurt, but it made her feel a little uncomfortable. Who was Li Qinxue? She was actually cooking for her. She was willing to bet that Li Qinxue had never cooked for herself in the past few decades. But now, she was thinking of making a sandwich for her. Mom, let me do it. Su Qingseng calmly put away the emotions on her face and took a few steps forward to stand in front of the kitchen counter. Don't, let's go out to eat. You're pregnant. How can I let you cook? It's okay. Su Qingseng smelled the obvious burning smell that even the range hood couldn't hide. Mom, stand outside a little. Otherwise, the smell of smoke will be too strong. No, you should rest. I'm too stupid. I don't even know how to cook. Mom, how can you be stupid? In my heart, you're the smartest. Su Qingseng smiled at Li Qinxue, washed the black bottom of the pot, and took out the eggs again. Mom, why don't you go outside and rest? It's okay. I'll stand here and look at you. Li Qinxue looked at Su Qingseng's slightly bulging belly. I always feel that we should go out to eat. There's no need. How can I be so fragile? Su Qingseng turned on the fire and poured oil. Didn't you hear? In the past, people were still working in the fields a few days before they were going to give birth. Although she had never given birth, as an obstetrician and gynecologist, she had heard too much in the hospital. Many mothers-in-law, or mothers liked to tell their daughter-in-law or daughter, how hard they had worked back then, and how happy they were now when they gave birth. That was in the past, and now is now. Li Qinxue watched Su Qingseng put the eggs into the pot nimbly. It was the same process, but Su Qingseng's movements were smoother than hers. Mom, when you fry this egg, don't turn the fire too high. Just turn the fire to medium. Fry this side first. When you feel that the bottom is golden brown, it's almost done. Then turn it over. It won't take too long. When the egg is old, it won't taste good. As she spoke, Su Qingsang had already fried the egg. She scooped it out and continued with the second one. At the same time, she turned around and put the toast into the oven. This is cooked, right? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. But if you roast it, it will taste better later. I like to eat it this way. As Su Qingsang spoke, she continued to fry the second egg. It was just turned over. Li Qianxue blinked. Qingsang, you're amazing. This really isn't amazing. Su Qingsang smiled. She was a little embarrassed by Li Qianxue's exaggerated praise. It's just the simplest. But I don't even know how to do the simplest. But Mom, you know how to make money. As Su Qingsang spoke, she had already fried the second egg. She chatted with Li Qianxue while her hands didn't stop moving. Look, the Li Corporation is so big. And there are so many things to do. Mom, you can still do so well. If it were me, I definitely wouldn't be able to do it. That's because you didn't learn. If you learned, you would also be able to do it. Not necessarily. Mom, don't think too highly of me. I really don't have that talent. Su Qingsang made all 3 sandwiches, then cut the first one into 4 pieces and placed them. Okay, another glass of milk. It's done. Try it. Li Qianxue sat down, tasted it, and nodded heavily. Delicious. Qingsang, your cooking is so good. You're the one who doesn't mind. Su Qingsang sat down as well. Just as she took a bite, Hua Jinyao came back. He was used to running in the morning every morning. He didn't go when Su Qingsang's morning sickness was the most serious. Recently, Su Qingsang became sleepy again, and she didn't have morning sickness anymore. So he resumed running in the morning. He was carrying the breakfast he had just bought in his hand. When he saw the sandwich on the table, he looked at Su Qingsang. Didn't I say that I would buy breakfast today? Why did you do it yourself? Don't you think it's too smoky? I'm just making a sandwich. How can there be smoky smoke? Su Qingsang never thought of herself as too delicate. Li Qianxue couldn't help but defend Su Qingsang. It's my fault. I thought I was going to make breakfast for Qingsang. I didn't expect that I would fail and have to let Qingsang clean up the aftermath. Mom, Su Qingsang interrupted her. Why am I the one who's cleaning up the aftermath? You're the one who gave me a chance to perform. Otherwise, I'll forget all my cooking skills next time. You, Li Qianxue didn't know if it was because they had talked it out, but she could really feel that Su Qingsang's tone was much more casual when talking to her. She was a little happy and a little emotional. No matter how unruly Su Qinghui was, her daughter was a good one. Then wouldn't the breakfast I bought be wasted? What's there to waste? Don't we still have you? After breakfast, because it was still a small long holiday, Su Qingsang suggested to Li Qianxue that they go shopping. Li Qianxue was also very interested. However, she looked at Su Qingsang's stomach worriedly. Are you okay? You really don't have to treat me like a doll. I'm in good health. As Su Qingsang spoke, she even made a fist gesture. Li Qianxue smiled. Hua Jinyao volunteered to be the driver. He took the mother and daughter out. This time, Su Qingsang wanted to buy a few maternity clothes. She was getting older and older. She could still wear sportswear now, but she wouldn't be able to wear it any later. Not only maternity clothes, but she also liked to go shopping in maternity shops. In the past, she didn't quite understand that kind of feeling. When she saw a baby, she only felt that it was very cute. Now even when she saw a baby, she felt that it was cute. Does this look good? Su Qingsang held a light blue dress in her hand. Looking at the style, she felt that it was cute. It looks good. Li Qianxue fully affirmed her taste. Buy another set of pink. If it's a boy and a girl, it'll be a boy and a girl. What if it's 2 boys? Then buy 2 sets of each. Hua Jinyao was very generous. That way we'll have both boys and girls. This is good. And the one just now, I think we'll buy both. Li Qianxue nodded and suddenly approached Su Qingsang. You work in the hospital yourself. Is it possible for you to know in advance? It wasn't that she valued boys over girls. It was just that she was simply curious. Mom. Su Qingsang smiled. I'm a doctor. I can't break the rules, can I? I've told Jinyao that we won't go for that checkup. When the time comes, let nature take its course. Whether it's a boy or a girl, it's a gift from God. That's right. Hua Jinyao nodded. Whether it was a boy or a girl, he liked them all. Speaking of which, you can think of names for the children first. Li Qianxue suggested. Think of 4 names. 2 boys and 2 girls. You can also use them as backup. It's not my turn to do that. Yesterday, Old Master Hua had said that he would personally name his 2 precious great-grandchildren. Of course, that was the reason. With their great-grandfather around, Old Master Hua had to think of it first. In fact, Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang had thought of many names during this period of time. But both of them felt that this was good, and that was good. In the end, they simply ignored it, and let Old Master Hua worry about it. The 3 of them chatted and laughed for the whole morning. Now Su Qingsang would sleep for a while after eating. Therefore, after eating outside, Hua Jinyao rushed home with the 2 of them. Hua Jinyao had just parked the car, and was about to get out to open the door for Su Qingsang and Li Qianxue. At this time, the security guard of the community behind him came out. Mr. Hua, you're back? A person came into the community, and kept saying that he was a guest of your family. I asked him what kind of guest he was, but he didn't say and refused to leave. The security guards of the community were very responsible. Usually people who came in and out would only be let in after asking. Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue had been here before, so the security guards knew them. However, the security guards didn't know the person who came today, and he looked very suspicious. Guest? Hua Jinyao raised his eyebrows and saw a man walk out of the apartment door. He looked to be in his 30s. He had a baby face. His facial features were put together, but he didn't look childish. He gave off the feeling that he was a little fresh meat. However, at this time, his slightly plump lips were curled into a smile, giving off the feeling that he was a ruffian. You are. Hua Jinyao was very sure that he didn't know this person at all. At the same time, Su Qingsang and Li Qianxue also got out of the car. The man wasn't Hua Jinyao at all. He directly ran in front of Li Qianxue. Qianxue, I'm here to look for you. Wei Ting. Li Qianxue was shocked when she saw the person. Her eyes were filled with unconcealable shock. Why are you here? No, how did you know I was here? The smile on the man named Wei Ting's face became brighter and brighter. He shook the phone in his palm. Qianxue, have you forgotten what I do? I located your phone yesterday. I flew all the way here to look for you this morning. How is it? Are you touched? What was there to be touched about? Li Qianxue only felt very awkward now. Wei Ting, who gave you the right to locate my phone? Did I agree to you locating my phone? Also, what do you want to do? Are you angry? Don't be angry. Wei Ting put away the smile on his face. It more or less gave people the feeling that he was a little frivolous and indecent. Seeing that Li Qianxue seemed to be really angry, he also put away the mischievous smile on his face. Don't you know how I located it? No matter what, I came back from Silicon Valley. How can such a small matter trouble me? As for what you said I wanted to do, you refused to see me before, and you've been disappearing for the past few days. Then I can only come to look for you. You're looking for me? Why are you looking for me? To pursue you. Didn't I say that? I said that I like you. And I want to pursue you. Su Qingsang, who had been watching all this time, felt that her eyeballs were about to fall out. When she was joking with Li Qianxue, she said that she would bless a handsome young man to pursue her properly. She didn't expect that her words would come true. A handsome young man really did come. Looking at this handsome young man, he was only a few years older than her. Could it be that Li Qianxue was going to find a young stepfather for her? Wei Ting, can you stop causing trouble? Li Qianxue was very embarrassed by his words. Her daughter and son were by her side now. What nonsense was this Wei Ting talking about here? How is it causing trouble? I'm serious. Wei Ting raised 3 fingers. Look, I even chased you all the way to Rong City for you. How can you say that I'm causing trouble? His gaze fell on Su Qingsang, who was at the side, and he said in a somewhat fawning manner, Hello, you're Qianxue's daughter, right? My name is Wei Ting. I'm your mother's suitor. No matter how knowledgeable Su Qingsang was, she was so shocked that her teeth almost fell out when she heard that her mother had a suitor. "Hello, Mr. Wei." Su Qingsang forced herself not to reveal a look of surprise. She subconsciously glanced at Hu Jinniao. Wei Ting also looked at Hu Jinniao and took the initiative to extend his right hand. "Hello, President Hua. I've heard of you. The Tianyu Group in Lin City is operating very well." "President Hua is amazing. You're welcome." Hu Jinniao looked at the other party's outstretched hand, then looked at Li Qianxue, who was standing beside him with an awkward expression, and shook hands with him generously. The smile on Wei Ting's face became even more sincere because of Hu Jinniao and Su Qingsang's friendliness. "If there's a chance, I hope to cooperate with your Tianyu Group. If there's a chance." Hu Jinniao didn't say anything definite. The man in front of him was Li Qianxue's suitor, and he had chased after her to Rong City. He wasn't sure what would happen in the future. Since that was the case, he chose to observe first. "Jinniao, Qingsang, it's really nice to meet you today." As Wei Ting spoke, he moved his body forward. "I hope that you can help me put in a good word for me in front of Qianxue on account of my sincerity." As he spoke, he winked at Su Qingsang. Li Qianxue felt a headache coming on. She turned around and looked at the stunned security guard. "I'm sorry, please help me take this person out." "What?" Wei Ting widened his eyes and looked at Li Qianxue. "Qianxue, our two companies are working together. If you throw me out like this, how can our two companies continue to work together? If you want to talk about business, we'll talk about it when I return to Lin City. Now I can either ask you to leave, or I can ask the security guard to send you away. This is my private time. I don't want to use it to talk about business." "Qianxue?" Wei Ting waved away the approaching security guard. "I came to look for you, because I know that this is your private time. After all, every time I go to your company to look for you, you insist that you can't talk about anything other than business in the company. Now that I've finally found you, you say that this is private time, and we can't talk about business? Well, let me ask you, when do you plan to have a good talk with me about the matter between us?" Li Qianxue had a headache. She didn't know what was wrong with Wei Ting. Because the two companies were working together, after meeting him twice, Li Qianxue had more contact with him. However, even if there were more of these, it would only be communication between her and Wei Ting regarding the cooperation project and official matters. But some time ago, Wei Ting suddenly said that he liked her and wanted to pursue her. This was simply too ridiculous. Li Qianxue wouldn't believe it at all. In her opinion, Wei Ting was just bored and wanted to look for her as a pastime. He had the leisure, but she didn't want to cooperate. She was too busy carrying forward the Li Corporation. How could she have the time to care about these romantic affairs? "It's impossible for me to be with you, and there's nothing to talk about. You can go. Don't do this next time." He chased her all the way to Rong City without even asking. In her opinion, it wasn't sincerity, but harassment. Especially since he had even located her phone. This was simply intolerable. What's not possible? Why is it not possible? Wei Ting took a few steps forward and stood in front of Li Qianxue again. "Why is it not possible? You haven't even talked to me, and you already say that I can't do it. You should at least talk to me for a while before coming to a conclusion, right?" "I don't need to talk to you for a while. I can tell you now. Of course it's impossible for us. First, I'm divorced, and according to your own words, you haven't even had a girlfriend. Second, as you can see, my daughter is pregnant, and I'm about to become a grandmother. And you're still so young. How do you think we can be together? It's a good thing that you want to be a grandmother. What does it have to do with me wanting to be with you?" Li Qianxue had an inexplicable headache. She, who hadn't slept well to begin with, felt even more tired now. She didn't want to explain. "It's not suitable. You can go." Chapter 639. Su Qinghui? Why is he here? How much did he hear? Li Qianxue subconsciously frowned, but she stood there without moving. Su Qinghui had booked a plane ticket back to Lin City in the afternoon. He knew that Li Qianxue wouldn't go back so soon. After thinking about it, he decided to visit Li Qianxue before he left. After what happened yesterday, He knew how much Li Qianxue hated him now, but he couldn't help but want to see her again. Even if he didn't say anything, just looking at her was good enough. However, Su Qinghui didn't expect that he would see such a scene. Li Qianxue actually had a new suitor, a suitor who was only a few years older than her daughter. In fact, over the years, there had been many men who had expressed their admiration for Li Qianxue in the business world. But at that time, she was married. Now Li Qianxue had divorced him. For the first time, Su Qinghui realized that if Li Qianxue wanted to, it was very likely that she could end her single life at any time. This was not a good feeling. He had a feeling that Li Qianxue was getting further and further away from him, and it was getting harder and harder to catch up with her. The moment Li Qianxue saw Su Qinghui, Wei Ting also saw him. As Li Qianxue's suitor, of course, he had found out about Li Qianxue's situation. He had seen Su Qinghui before. As a tech upstart, even if he didn't know much about the upper-class society of Lin City before, if he really wanted to, there was nothing he couldn't ask. What's more, Li Qianxue had previously announced that she was cutting off her mother-daughter relationship with Su Peijian. Wei Ting could casually investigate, and he would be able to find out. Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui had been married for more than 20 years. No matter what the process was, they were divorced. Wei Ting's footsteps moved in Li Qianxue's direction without a trace. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, he quickly stood next to Li Qianxue. Su Qingsang widened her eyes at the scene in front of her. She couldn't help but look at Hua Jinyao again. Hua Jinyao squeezed her hand and gestured for her to wait and see. Su Qinghui had come to see Li Qianxue, but now he didn't know what else to say. Li Qianxue's meaning was already very clear yesterday. No matter how much he said, it couldn't stop the two of them from drifting apart in the past 26 years. No, their hearts had never even been together. He looked at the young man who had boldly courted her. He was younger and braver than himself. He was able to chase her all the way to Rong City and openly express his feelings. In this regard, he was inferior to him. Su Qinghui had been very confident. He believed that as long as he persevered and made Li Qianxue understand his true feelings, sooner or later, she would be touched by him and forgive him. But now he was suddenly a little uncertain. Could it be that before he could ask Li Qianxue to forgive him, she had already been with someone else? During the Mid-Autumn Festival, the temperature in Rong City wasn't low at noon. Su Qingsang was pregnant. After standing for a while, she felt unbearably hot. "Dad, why are you here?" Since Li Qianxue didn't speak, she could only speak first. "I came to see you," Su Qinghui said, but his eyes fell on Li Qianxue. "I've booked a flight this afternoon. I came to see you before I left." "Is that so? Do you want to go up and sit for a while?" Su Qingsang wasn't helping Su Qinghui, but she didn't really like Wei Ting, the man who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. She didn't quite agree with Wei Ting's decision to locate Li Qianxue's phone. No. Su Qinghui clearly saw Li Qianxue's expression change because of Su Qingsang's words. She didn't welcome him, so why should he continue to stay? "I'm just here to see you. I'll leave after I see you." It wasn't that Li Qianxue didn't feel Wei Ting standing beside her. She resisted the urge to retreat to the side and let Wei Ting stand beside her. She saw the sadness in Su Qinghui's eyes, and she did feel a sense of pleasure. However, this kind of emotion came and went quickly. Since Su Qinghui had nothing to do with her anymore, why should she care about his feelings? Whether he was good or bad, it was none of her business. Although it seemed refreshing to use another man to make Su Qinghui suffer, she disdained it. So after Su Qinghui turned around, she took a step to the side. Wei Ting quickly turned around and stood in front of her. "Qianxue, did you just come back from shopping? Are you tired? Have you eaten? Why don't we go eat together?" The series of concerned questions made Su Qinghui stop in his tracks. Resisting the urge to turn around, he slowly walked out of the neighborhood. He needed time to think about what to do next. Li Qianxue took a big step back and pulled a meter away from Wei Ting. "Wei Ting, I've eaten. Sorry, you can go eat by yourself." She could have agreed to go eat with Wei Ting to deal a blow to Su Qinghui. However, she really disdained to do so. Wei Ting's face darkened. He looked at Li Qianxue with resentment. "Qianxue, I came all the way here to find you. You're not even willing to have a meal with me? I've eaten. Then can you have dinner with me? Sorry, I have to accompany my daughter and son-in-law for dinner. Then we can eat together. Wei Ting looked in the direction of Su Qingsang and Hu Jingyao as he spoke. I believe your daughter and son-in-law won't mind, right? Su Qingsang frowned. When she met Li Qianshua's gaze, she shook her head rather rudely. I'm sorry, Mr. Wei, but I mind. Wei Ting didn't expect Su Qingsang to be so rude. Su Qingsang didn't look at him at all. She only looked at Hu Jingyao and Li Qianxue. Jingyao, Mom, let's go up. I'm so hot from the sun. Qianxue. Wei Ting was anxious and walked in front of Li Qianxue. He had a pitiful look on his face. Unfortunately, Li Qianxue was unmoved. I'm sorry, Mr. Wei. It's my private time now. Please leave. I won't. Wei Ting was very persistent, and Li Qianxue didn't stand on ceremony with him. She waved her hand. The security guard, who had been waiting to watch the show, finally had something to do. He stepped forward to block Wei Ting, and he could only watch Li Qianxue and Su Qingsang leave. When they went upstairs, Su Qingsang asked Hu Jingyao to bring the things back to the room. She followed beside Li Qianxue, unable to hide the gossip on her face. Mom, you and Mr. Wei? Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang and was a little helpless. Don't talk nonsense. I have nothing to do with him. Really? But he said he wanted to chase you. You'll believe him? Li Qianxue was no longer an ignorant little girl. She wouldn't believe Wei Ting's words. Maybe it's because I didn't treat him well the first time we worked together. I don't know why he made up his mind and insisted on pestering me. It means that you're infinitely charming, Mom. Su Qingsang's eyes were full of teasing. All right, let's not talk about him. Anyway, I have no chance with him. Mom, actually I think so. How could he be sincere? You can actually observe him before making a decision. How? Li Qianxue didn't have that intention at all. Even if she had that intention, it wouldn't be towards Wei Ting. Do you know how old he is this year? I'm nearly 20 years older than him. Tell me, what does he love about me? My mom is so good. No matter where she is, she deserves to be loved. Just coax me. Although Li Qianxue said that, she was in a good mood. As for Wei Ting, she really didn't think that there was any possibility between the two of them. In the following time, Li Qianxue continued to accompany Su Qingsang. When Su Qingsang went to work, Li Qianxue used the computer at home to deal with some business matters. When Su Qingsang didn't go to work and stayed at home, she tried her best to improve her relationship with her. A few times, she even pulled Su Qingsang to sleep with her. However, when she went out with Su Qingsang, she would always run into Wei Ting. Rather than saying it was a chance encounter, it was more like an opportunity that he deliberately created. Li Qianxue didn't like Wei Ting and thought that it was impossible for her to be with him. However, she couldn't do it if she wanted to forcefully chase him away. After all, the two families still had a relationship. This caused her to not have a good face every time she saw Wei Ting, who appeared in front of her with a mischievous smile. However, Wei Ting seemed to have a grudge against her. The more she didn't give him a good face, the more he liked to stick to her. After these few days, Su Qingsang could more or less tell that it didn't seem like Wei Ting just wanted to play. However, all of this depended on Li Qianshue's own intentions. Su Qingsang didn't participate or give any opinions. She believed that Li Qianxue could handle these matters well. 10 days later, Old Master Li returned to Lin City. Li Qianxue also decided to go back. Although Su Qingsang was very reluctant, she had no choice but to accept reality. At Rong City Airport, Su Qingsang and Hu Jingyao sent Li Qianxue back to Lin City. Li Qianxue was also reluctant, but there were 2 contracts waiting for her to negotiate in Lin City. If she really wanted to relax, she could only wait for Su Yusen to graduate and come back to lighten her burden. Qingsang, you must take good care of yourself. I know. Su Qingsang nodded. Her eyes were a little hot. Mom, I don't want you to go. Silly girl. Li Qianxue blinked her eyes and suppressed the urge to cry. You're going to be a mother, so you can't be like a child anymore. You're pregnant now, so you're not like usual. Remember to take good care of yourself. I will. Besides, there's still Hu Jingyao. Mom, don't worry. I'll definitely take good care of Qingsang. If you don't take good care of her, I won't let you off. Li Qianxue glared at Hu Jiniao threateningly. When she looked at Su Qingsang again, she held her hand and was about to say a few more words when she saw Su Qingsang slowly approaching behind Hu Jiniao from the corner of her eye. Why was he here again? He was really haunting her. Li Qianxue's brows were tightly furrowed as she watched Wei Ting walk in front of her. Hi Qianxue, what a coincidence. After he finished joking with Li Qianxue, he greeted Su Qingsang and her husband. No matter what, he had to please his future daughter and son-in-law. His attitude was still very important. Li Qianxue didn't believe that there was such a coincidence. Wei Ting, did you locate my phone again? Qianxue, you've really wronged me. This time, I really didn't locate your phone. He had only used his connections to check the airline's booking records. After all, he didn't believe that Li Qianxue would stay here forever. Since she had to go back sooner or later, she naturally needed to book a plane ticket. How smart was he? I just happened to be going back to Lin City. Look, aren't we fated? I don't think so. Li Qianxue wasn't a young girl who knew nothing. She was sure that Wei Ting must have done something. If you want to go back to Lin City, go ahead. I'm not going back. Then where are you going, Qianxue? Do I need to report to you where I'm going? Of course not. Wei Ting quickly waved his hand and looked at Li Qianxue with a fervent gaze. I just want to follow you wherever you go. You can treat me as one of your luggage. I don't have such a big luggage. Qianxue? Mr. Wei, please excuse me. I'm about to board the plane. It's okay, I'll go with you. Wei Ting fully displayed his experience that the thicker his skin was, the easier it was to chase after a girl. Li Qianxue's brows were tightly knitted. Who wants to go with you? I told you. I'm not going back to Lin City. That's great. I can change my flight. Anyway, I'm going with you. We can just treat it as getting used to the trip in advance. After Wei Ting finished speaking, he added 4 words. Honeymoon trip. Wei Ting. Li Qianxue was in a hurry to get rid of Wei Ting. She didn't even say goodbye to Su Qingsang and left. If you continue to talk nonsense, I won't be polite to you. The two of them disappeared at the boarding gate. Su Qingsang turned to look at Hu Jiniao, her eyes full of shock. Why did she feel that there was something wrong with this scene? Jiniao, what do you think of this Wei Ting? It's not easy to come to a conclusion for the time being. He looks good, and there's nothing wrong with him in other aspects. Hu Jiniao told her about the information he had investigated. He's considered a tech upstart. In his early years, when he was studying abroad, he developed a software with his friends. Then that game software was sold at a fairly good price. After that, he used this money as a startup capital and set up his own company with his friend. The cooperation with the Li Corporation this time was also because they installed an internal software on all the computers in your mother's company. That's how they got to know each other. Is that so? These were all work-related matters. What Su Qingsang cared about the most was how a man behaved in private, how he handled himself, and most importantly, how his relationship was. I haven't found any of this for the time being. Hu Jiniao didn't have much information about Wei Ting. It was just what he had just said. I only know that he didn't seem to have a girlfriend when he was in Silicon Valley. His friends said that he kept his chastity like jade and was quite clean. That good. This Wei Ting didn't look young, right? He hadn't had a girlfriend before? This didn't make sense. Yes. Hu Jiniao nodded. At least that's what the information says. Further ahead, it will take time to find out his identity and experience. If you're worried, I'll ask Yang Wenchang to tell you the results in 2 days. Su Qingsang shook her head. There's no hurry. There's no sign of anything happening now. Besides, I believe in my mother's taste. You believe in your mother's taste? Hu Jiniao raised his eyebrows, his eyes a little uncertain. Just based on her taste in your father? Hu Jiniao. Su Qingsang raised her hand to pinch Hu Jiniao's arm. Hu Jiniao wrapped her hand in his palm. All right, let's not worry about your mother's relationship for the time being. Wei Ting's words just now reminded me of something. What? We've been married for more than a year, but we haven't had a honeymoon together yet. Su Qingsang blinked. Don't tell me that you want to take me on a honeymoon now? Can't I? Su Qingsang looked down at her belly, which was a little bigger than 2 days ago. Now, at this time? Are you sure? Didn't you always say that you're in good health, and that there's no problem at all? Hua Jingyao felt that this suggestion was feasible. If you're willing, I'll take you out to play for a few days. Where to? Su Qingseng was really interested after hearing Hua Jinyao's words. Where do you want to go? Su Qingseng blinked. You don't want to go out, do you? Flying for a long time might cause a certain amount of damage to the fetus. If you want to play in the country, it's fine. It's best to choose the kind that doesn't take too long to drive. Su Qingseng was just saying it casually, but she didn't expect Hua Jingyao to really arrange it. When they came the next Saturday, Hua Jingyao brought her to his newly bought RV. The back of the RV was very spacious. It was very comfortable. Su Qingseng felt like she was sitting on a flat road. She retracted her gaze from the window and looked at Hua Jingyao. When did you buy this car? Don't tell me that you bought it specially to take me out to play. Can't I? His woman could never be too spoiled. Not to mention a car. Even if she wanted a yacht or a plane, he could still satisfy her. It's a bit of a waste. Su Qingseng looked at the rather luxurious furnishings in the RV. I've really only seen this on TV. It's okay. If you like it, I'll buy 8 or 10 of them. Paint them in different colors. When the time comes, you can go to a place and drive one. It'll be like a rainbow. That's enough. If he continued to be like this, he would really spoil her. Su Qingseng yawned and looked at the bed in the RV. How long will it take? About 3 hours. You sleep for a while. I'll wake you up when we arrive. What about you? I'll watch over you. Su Qingseng smiled because of his words. She leaned over and kissed the corner of his lips. Then, she went to the bed and lay down. She fell asleep. Hua Jingyao took out his notebook and began to deal with work. 3 hours later, Su Qingseng woke up after a good sleep. When she got up, she found Hua Jingyao sitting by the bed and looking at her. You're awake? We just arrived. We arrived. Su Qingseng sat up and looked out of the car window, but she found that she could see nothing but a white wall. Don't look. If you want to see, get out of the car. This is the parking lot. Su Qingseng nodded. Then wait for me. I'll change and tidy up. Okay. Hua Jingyao waited for Su Qingseng to get out of the car together. Only then did Su Qingseng realize that there was a 3-story villa in front of her. There were many kinds of flowers planted in the yard at the entrance, which looked quite beautiful and exquisite. She turned around and was about to talk to Hua Jingyao when she saw a car driving past on the road outside the villa. The open window allowed her to see the person sitting inside. Chapter 640. The car sped past in a flash. Su Qingseng looked at the familiar profile and subconsciously raised her foot to catch up with it. Before she could catch up, Hua Jingyao had already held her waist. What's wrong? Slow down. I think I saw a Mingwan. Su Qingseng looked at the silhouette of the car that sped away. She had a feeling that the side profile of the face sitting in the car belonged to Shi Mingwan. But shouldn't Shi Mingwan be in Lin City at this time? Moreover, she seemed to have seen another figure in the car. It looked like the back of a man. Shi Mingwan would be with a man? Shi Mingwan? Hua Jingyao glanced in the direction of the car. You must be mistaken. By the way, you still haven't told me where we are. Qingcheng in the neighboring province. Su Qingseng nodded. She knew about Qingcheng. It was next to the province where Rong City was located. It took about 3.5 hours to drive from Rong City. Qingcheng had a deep cultural heritage, and later on, it developed very well. It could be considered a city that was both ancient and modern in the east. It was a 3-hour drive from Rong City, but it was still in the south and north of Lin City. Shi Mingwan was video chatting with her 2 days ago. How could she be here? Maybe I'm seeing things. Su Qingseng decided to call Shi Mingwan later. Her decision to come here was also temporary, so Shi Mingwan still didn't know. Everything about leaving Lin City with Hua Jingyao and coming to Rong City was great, except for the fact that she had to be far away from her family and friends. It made her feel a little lonely. At the same time, behind the extended Bentley that had just left, Shi Mingwan looked at John Hausa, who was on the phone. There wasn't much of a smile on her face. She turned her eyes away from him. The environment of this villa was especially good, and it was also close to the city. The name was even more pleasing to the ear. It was called Cherry Blossom Manor. The people who developed this place had planted a large patch of cherry blossoms, according to the latitude and climate of this place. There were cherry blossoms on both sides of the road. When spring came, cherry blossoms would fall on both sides of the road. It was very beautiful. Unfortunately, Shermingwan came at the wrong time. It wasn't the season for cherry blossoms. She couldn't see the cherry blossoms. And even if she could, she wasn't in the mood to appreciate them. Jean House's voice was in her ear. She could guess who the person on the other end of the phone was. Chen Feifei, Jean House's fiancée. I'm a little busy these few days. If there's anything, we'll talk about it when I get back. Yes. Take care of your health. Don't think too much. Jean House's voice was clearer than other men's. At this time, he was speaking to the person on the other end of the phone, in a very gentle voice. Shermingwan's expression wasn't very good. When Jean House hung up the phone, she turned her gaze back. If you're so afraid of her thinking too much, just bring her out directly. Why drag her along? Shermingwan felt a little stuffy. The feeling of being unable to breathe was very uncomfortable. Take me to the airport, I want to go back. Jean House's reaction was to hug her body, easily lifting her up and placing her on his lap. Shermingwan didn't have time to struggle. She just passively stuck to Jean House's body. The two of them had been entangled for nearly half a year. In his arms, she didn't have much spirit to resist. She was already used to his demands and his robbing behavior. But no matter how many habits she had, it couldn't overcome the fact that the man in front of her was someone else's fiancé. She didn't know what went wrong, and the situation in front of her made her very conflicted. She longed for everything about this man, his kiss, his embrace, his breath. But she resisted everything about him. He didn't admit that she was her dear brother. He even had a fiancé. Just like this time, she chased him away and told him that since he had a fiancé, he shouldn't come looking for her again. But what about him? He forcefully barged into her home, and then invaded her residence. He even brought her to Qing City. However, the back of her waist was tightly held by him. Her body was brought into his arms. Very quickly, her lips were blocked by Jean House, and she couldn't say a word. She frowned slightly. She couldn't be more familiar with the facial features of the person in front of her. Even if she closed her eyes, she could still picture the other party's appearance in her heart. But this man didn't belong to her, at least. Her lips suddenly hurt. Her absent-mindedness made the man unhappy, and he bit her lips hard. When she came back to her senses, Jean House was staring at her face. His slightly narrow eyes had a gloominess that she couldn't understand. Before she could react, his hand had already reached for the hem of her clothes. The dark glass in the middle of the car had already risen. The driver in front couldn't see what they were doing behind. Shermingwan didn't want him to succeed in such a place, so she held his hand with both hands. Jean House. She suddenly called his name very seriously. Jean House stopped what he was doing and looked at her silently. Are you going to be like this forever? While coaxing his fiancée, he imprisoned her, grasped her weakness and didn't let her leave. At this moment, her brows were filled with melancholy that couldn't be hidden. She was clearly such a beautiful person, but now, her face was filled with melancholy. Tell me, Jean House, are you going to be like this forever? He wanted to be like this, but she didn't want to continue. She had persisted until now, but she still couldn't make up her mind to leave Jean House's side. She was just hoping that one day, Jean House would remember that she was the little sister that he swore to love for the rest of his life. She waited for him to remember that he was the dear brother that she had made up her mind to always rely on. They used to depend on each other, and they used to be inseparable. But she lost him, and when she found him, he forgot who he was. That pair of eyes was too sad. Jean House didn't want to look at her anymore. He raised his hand to cover her eyes, lowered his head, and kissed her lips again. He couldn't see her eyes, but in the next moment, he felt the wetness in his palm. Jean House paused for a moment, but soon he deepened his plunder. Su Qingsang stretched and looked at the cherry blossom avenue in front of her, with a hint of regret in her eyes. If only we had come in April. We would have been able to see the cherry blossoms on both sides, right? Yes. Hua Jingyao nodded and put his arm around her waist. If you like it, we'll come again next April. This villa was one of the best in the area, and there were 2 more villas inside. Those 2 villas took up the largest area. They were booked as soon as they came out, and this villa had the best location, because not only could they see the cherry blossom avenue in front of them, but they could also see the largest inland lake in the city behind them. He had built a garden on the side of the lake. Sitting behind it, they could enjoy the lake breeze while enjoying the beautiful scenery. We'll talk about it later. Su Qingsang had slept for a long time in the car, so she wasn't sleepy at all. Let's go out for a walk. Okay. Another advantage of this place was that the environment was very good, and the neighborhood was very large. Su Qingsang and Hua Jingyao held hands and walked along the lake. They saw another villa. That villa was bigger than the one they were living in now. Is that villa also in this neighborhood? Hua Jingyao nodded. Looking at the villa, he suddenly remembered something. If he remembered correctly, the person who bought this villa seemed to have the surname Zhan. The Zhan family was one of the old aristocratic families in Qing City. Thinking of the Zhan family, he thought of the few times he had met Zhan Haoze in Lin City. If he remembered correctly, the Zhan family's various forces had been surging and hadn't stopped. Was this area developed by your company? Su Qingsang's words brought Hua Jingyao back to his senses. He smiled and held her hand as they walked down the stairs. Not only this cherry blossom manor, but the shopping mall outside, and the neighborhood beside the shopping mall were all built by Tianyu Group. At first they wanted to build a villa area here. After all, the scenery here was good, and the feng shui was good. After the villa area was built, they discovered that the nearby space was empty. At that time, the Qing city government was attracting investment, and Tianyu Group had the ability to do so, so they simply circled the land and became the current scale. Amazing! Hearing this, Hua Jingyao moved his face closer to Su Qingsang. Your husband is so amazing. Don't you want to give me some reward? With a bow sound, Su Qingsang leaned over and kissed his face. My husband is the best. Is that okay? So. The kiss wasn't sincere enough, but since he knew that Su Qingsang wasn't a very open person outside, he let her go. Looking at a rocking chair in a pavilion in front of them, he led Su Qingsang to sit down. The autumn wind was cool, and this season gave people a rather comfortable feeling. This area was built by Tianyu Group. What about Lin City? Su Qingsang had forgotten to ask about this. Why did you go to Lin City back then? Also, why were you in the hospital that day? Li Junxing received a transfer order to be the mayor of Lin City. He told me that this was an opportunity. However, our company had originally planned to open a branch in Lin City. There were a few projects that had already been set to start at that time. As for why I appeared in the hospital that day, when I went to inspect the construction site, a worker happened to have acute appendicitis. That day, Yang Wenchang drove my car for maintenance. I sent that person to the hospital myself. Unexpectedly, because he wasn't very familiar with the hospital, Hua Jingyao, who was about to leave after paying the fee, settling the worker down, and calling his family members, went in the wrong direction. So that's how it is. Su Qingsang thought about it and found it a little unbelievable. In that case, I have to thank that worker in your company. If he hadn't suddenly had acute appendicitis, we wouldn't have had the chance to meet, right? Not bad. Hua Jingyao nodded. Su Qingsang smiled and leaned her face against his chest. It's so comfortable here. Yes. If you like it, we can come a few more times next time. Okay. Su Qingsang nodded. She really liked it here. Closing her eyes, she could smell the osmanthus flowers in the air. Are osmanthus flowers planted here? Yes. There are a few osmanthus trees in front. I'll take you to see them later. Okay. Su Qingsang found that Hua Jingyao's choice of place was very satisfactory. She was pregnant now and a little lazy. She didn't want to go to places that were too torturous or too tiring. Later, let's go eat Qing City's specialty dishes. I know a restaurant here that makes very authentic roast whole sheep. Okay. Su Qingsang's appetite had been good recently, and she wasn't too picky. In fact, Many things weren't as exaggerated as they sounded. She couldn't eat this or that. She had to pay attention to the amount and the actual condition of her body. Not being picky was also a kind of prenatal education. Su Qingseng had never been to Qing City before. The place that Hua Jingyao mentioned was in a courtyard near the suburbs. The courtyard was a standard northern courtyard house. It was spacious and grand with northern trees planted. It looked just like an ordinary courtyard house. Su Qingseng followed Hua Jingyao into the room in the middle of the courtyard. The inside was completely different from the outside. The decoration was very elegant. There weren't many tables in the hall, and the corridors on both sides could lead to private rooms. Judging from the number of rooms, there didn't seem to be many. How do you know about this place? This boss used to work with Tianyu. Later, because he always had to socialize outside, his body couldn't take it. So he didn't open a company and came to open this farmhouse. There's a limited number of guests every day. If there's more than that, he won't take any guests. As Hua Jingyao spoke, a slightly chubby middle-aged man walked out of one of the private rooms. When he saw the two of them, he quickly stepped forward and extended his hand to Hua Jingyao. President Hua, how rare. You actually have time to come here. I brought my wife here to eat roast whole sheep. Hua Jingyao smiled and shook hands with the other party. How is it? Is there a seat? President Hua, you're here. Even if there's no seat, I'll add it for you. The man smiled like a flower. This way, please. The sky room. Thank you. Hua Jingyao followed behind the boss, while Su Qingseng looked around. She rarely saw such a courtyard house in Lin City. It was still different from the courtyard houses in the imperial capital. After entering the sky room, Hua Jingyao asked the boss to serve the roast whole sheep. While waiting for the dishes to be served, Su Qingseng looked at the courtyard at the back. The roast whole sheep is roasted in the back? Yes. Directly roasted? Yes. Do you want to see it? Su Qingseng really wanted to see it. She nodded and Hua Jingyao let her out. After leaving the private room, a waiter served the dishes to a private room in front. The moment the waiter entered the door, Su Qingseng and Hua Jingyao happened to walk inside. She saw that the person who came out of the room was very familiar. It was Zhang Haoze. She was stunned for a moment. Zhang Haoze was very tall. He was about the same height as Hua Jingyao, so she couldn't see inside the private room. However, the moment Zhang Haoze came out and the door closed, she seemed to see a woman sitting inside. President Hua. Zhang Haoze greeted Hua Jingyao first when he saw him. Hua Jingyao nodded. He wasn't surprised that Zhang Haoze was here. Qingqing was the Zhang family's Hua Yangxiu. It was normal for Zhang Haoze to be here. President Zhang is also here to eat roast whole sheep? Yes. Zhang Haoze nodded and looked at Su Qingseng. He nodded slightly. Hello, Mrs. Hua. Su Qingseng's expression was a little cold. Speaking of which, Zhang Haoze had helped her before. She should thank him. However, when she thought about how this man was Shi Mengwan's big brother, and how he had forgotten about Shi Mengwan, and was with another woman, she felt a little uncomfortable. President Zhang, is that Miss Chen inside? Su Qingseng remembered that the woman beside Zhang Haoze had the surname Chen. She was just asking casually. Before Zhang Haoze could say anything, Hua Jingyao cooperated with Su Qingseng and spoke. Speaking of which, our company has worked with the Chen family before. If it's Miss Chen, why don't we go together? No. Zhang Haoze's expression didn't look too good. President Hua, it's not convenient for me right now. If there's a chance next time, I'll visit you again. President Zhang, you're too polite. Hua Jingyao and Su Qingseng could tell that the person inside wasn't Chen Feifei. Su Qingseng's expression didn't look too good either. Seeing Zhang Haoze walk to the other side, she glared at his back. What's wrong? Why are you unhappy? Hua Jingyao didn't quite understand Su Qingseng's thoughts. He looked in Zhang Haoze's direction and asked, Did he offend you? Yes. How did he offend you? Tell me. I'll help you vent your anger. Forget it. Su Qingseng shook her head. Zhang Haoze had forgotten about Shi Mengwan and was with Chen Feifei. Now he was here with another woman. Don't tell her that it was nothing. She could tell from Zhang Haoze's expression just now. There must be something fishy going on. She felt a little upset. Poor Shi Mengwan had rejected countless suitors for such a man for so many years. She was still single. But what about Zhang Haoze? He was hugging women here, and had no idea who Shi Mengwan was. Although feelings were one-sided, she had to be allowed to stand up for her friend, right? However, there was no need to tell Hu Jingyao about these thoughts now. Looking at the closed door of the private room, the waiter still hadn't come out to serve the dishes. She held Hu Jingyao's hand and said, "Didn't you say you wanted to see the whole roast lamb? Let's go." She left with Hu Jingyao, and the door of the private room opened. The waiter came out from inside, and the person standing behind the door was Shi Mengwan, who was careful not to be seen. She placed one hand on her chest to suppress her heart, which was about to jump out. She took a deep breath and leaned her body against the wall. Suddenly, a wave of sadness welled up in her heart. Did such a shameful relationship really have to continue? Su Qingseng didn't know what she had missed. After watching the live performance of the whole roast lamb for a while, she couldn't stand it anymore. The temperature was too high, and she was especially afraid of heat now. She didn't run into Zhang Haoze again when she returned to the private room. By the time she finished eating with Hu Jingyao, the waiter had already started to clean up the private room. Zhang Haoze had already left. After returning to the Cherry Blossom Manor, she sent a video request to Shi Mengwan, while Hu Jingyao went to take a shower. However, she was rejected. Su Qingseng was stunned for a moment before she thought of sending it again. Shi Mengwan had already taken the initiative to call. "Qingseng, Mengwan, is it not convenient for you now?" "Yes, a guest came over. She's going to look at clothes now. I'm going to measure her later." "There's still a guest at such a late hour? This person is too insensible. Doesn't she know that you need to rest?" Su Qingseng's tone was filled with heartache. Shi Mengwan didn't reply. She was just saying it. It wasn't that she didn't know Shi Mengwan's workaholic personality. "It's okay. I'm used to it. How have you been?" "I'm fine. Now the child is making trouble for me. He could even eat now. By the way, guess where I am now?" "Where are you?" Shi Mengwan already knew, so her tone wasn't surprised. "I'm in Qing City. You didn't expect it, did you?" Su Qingseng didn't hear anything wrong in Shi Mengwan's voice. After all, she couldn't see the other party's expression through the phone. "Hu Jingyao took me to eat roast whole lamb tonight. It tasted really good. Mengwan, come over next time. Let's do it again." "Okay." Shi Mengwan nodded and looked at the man who had just come out of the bathroom. "Why did you think of coming to Qing City?" Su Qingseng noticed that Shi Mengwan used the word come, but she didn't think in that direction. "Hu Jingyao said that my mother left. He was afraid that I would be bored at home, so he took me out for a walk. He said it was like a honeymoon." "That's great." Shi Mengwan smiled, her eyes filled with pure envy. How many people in the world could be as lucky as Su Qingseng? She met a man who liked her, doted on her, protected her, and held her in the palm of his hand? "Mengwan." Su Qingseng suddenly changed the topic, and her tone became serious. "Yes. Well." Su Qingseng wasn't good at this kind of thing, but thinking of Zhang Haoze's reaction today, she was really worried for her good friend. You still think about your dear brother. Don't you think about other men?" On the other end, Zhang Haoze had already walked behind Shi Mengwan. Her heart skipped a beat, and she forced her voice to remain calm. "Why are you talking about this?" Su Qingseng rarely mentioned this in front of her. This was a rare tacit understanding between the two sisters. "I just think that you should try to let it go. After all, the beautiful relationship in your heart as a childhood sweetheart might have long been forgotten by the other party. Moreover, so much time has passed. The person from back then might not be the person from back then. Haven't you ever thought about it? Perhaps what you're stubbornly pursuing is just an unwillingness in your heart. Or a fantasy. In fact, that man might already be married. He might even have a child. Or perhaps he is lacking in other aspects." "Qingseng, Mengwan, listen to me. I know what you're thinking, and I've always respected your determination to wait. But I feel that whether it's waiting or looking forward to it, it should be placed on someone who's worth it. For those who can't bear to part with it, there's really no need to waste your feelings. That would only increase your pain and emptiness." In silence, Shi Mengwan's body was pulled into Zhang Hao's arms. She almost threw the phone in her palm. Mengwan? Qing Sang stopped talking. I know everything. Everyone understood the logic, but it was too difficult to do it. Especially, Zhang Hao's hands had already reached into her collar. His lips, with a slight warmth, landed on the back of her neck. Shi Mengwan trembled and couldn't help but take a step forward, but she couldn't get rid of Zhang Hao's hands. He brought her back into his arms. She couldn't help but let out a soft cry. Mengwan, what's wrong? I'm fine. You're not angry, are you? Don't be angry. I really just think that it's not a good idea for you to wait endlessly like this. Chapter 641. Su Qingsang didn't want to interfere with Shi Mengwan's feelings, but she really felt that Zhang Hao wasn't worth Shi Mengwan waiting for. Let's not talk about the fact that he brought a woman out to eat alone today, which might not be a big deal. However, it was a fact that Zhang Hao and Chen Feifei were engaged. On the way back today, she also asked Hu Jingyao about it, and he briefly told her some things. The Zhang family's situation was even more complicated than the Hua family's. The Hua family still had old Master Hua, although Hua Mingmei and Hua Mingliang had their own ideas. However, whether it was old Master Hua or Hua Mingguang, they could suppress them. The company was divided into different departments, and everyone had their own things to do. Hua Jingyao alone could suppress those people. But the Zhang family's current situation was very complicated. Not to mention that Zhang Hao didn't have that kind of feelings for Shi Mengwan. He had completely forgotten about Shi Mengwan. Even if he hadn't forgotten, if he really got together with Shi Mengwan's life wouldn't be too good. Thinking of this, Su Qingsang became more and more worried. Mengwan, for some people, the environment is too complicated, and the experience of growing up is also very complicated. If you continue like this, I think it will be very hard for you. Shi Mengwan was still so young. There was no need for her to waste her time on Zhang Hao. It wasn't like she wasn't wanted. There had been too many people pursuing her over the years. Not to mention others. Hua Jingyao's childhood friend Wan Zianying was also not bad. The important thing was for her to learn to let go of the past, accept other men, and welcome a new life. Silence. Just as Shi Mengwan was about to speak, Zhang Hao's arms were already around her waist. She took a deep breath and forced herself not to reveal any flaws. I got it. Thank you, Qingsang. Why are you being so polite with me? Su Qingsang really wanted Shi Mengwan to be happy. Mengwan, find a good, right man. You deserve it. Shi Mengwan didn't say anything. Her hands became more and more unruly. She had to quickly end the conversation with Su Qingsang. My guest is here. I have to go. All right. Come to Rong City when you have time. I missed you so much. In the past, Su Qingsang had a cold personality and kept her distance from everyone. She was only close to Shi Mengwan. Okay. Shi Mengwan's voice disappeared in the beeping sound of the phone. Her clothes had been pushed up to her chest. Her body was turned around, but she didn't hug his neck like she used to. Instead, she put her hands on his chest, and her expression showed resistance. Zhang Hao stopped and stared at her face. Angry? Shi Mengwan looked at Zhang Hao and felt depressed. She was a little angry not at him but at herself. Ever since she was 12 years old, she had been looking forward to reuniting with her dear brother, because of the warmth of their youth. She understood what Su Qingsang said. But understanding was one thing, doing it was another. This man had become her obsession. She couldn't let him go. And she couldn't let him go. If she could get away, she would have asked herself to leave when she found out that Chen Feifei was beside Zhang Hao. Realizing that she was actually distracted again, Zhang Hao bit her lips again. Shi Mengwan was in pain and suddenly pushed him away. Zhang Hao. She really couldn't go on like this. Shi Mengwan turned her face away and didn't look at him. I want to go back to Lin City. Okay. Zhang Hao nodded. His rare attitude stunned her for a moment. After a few days, I'll go back with you. I want to go back now. Su Qingsang came to Qing City, and she didn't want to meet Su Qingsang. Zhang Hao narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Shi Mengwan. He suddenly went forward and picked her up. Before she could react, he carried her to the direction of the bed. Sure, Mengwan didn't manage to leave in the end. When she woke up in the morning, Jean Hausa had already left. He had been especially busy in Lin City, and it was even more so after coming to Qing City. In Lin City, when he was very busy, she still had her own things to do, such as going to the studio and drawing. But when she came here and stayed in this big villa, she felt like a bird with broken wings. After getting up, she wasn't in a hurry to go downstairs for breakfast. Sure, Mengwan casually put on a coat and went to the balcony. From here, she could see the lake at the back. The scenery was quite good. Not long after she sat down on the sofa, she actually saw Su Qingsang. Sure, Mengwan was shocked. She wanted to stand up without thinking, but she felt that her movements were too big. She was on the second floor now. Su Qingsang and Hua Jingyao were walking by the lake in the distance. When she saw the two of them walking in this direction, she was so shocked that she quickly got up and entered the room. She drew the curtains and stood by the curtains to look downstairs. Su Qingsang had already shown signs of pregnancy, and her lower abdomen was slightly bulging. She was wearing a pregnant dress, and her face was filled with a warm and satisfied smile. Hua Jingyao walked beside her, and the two of them whispered to each other from time to time. She was thinking too much. Su Qingsang wouldn't notice this side at all, much less discover her. The smile on Su Qingsang's face made Sure Mengwan envious. Her hand holding Hua Jingyao's made her yearn even more. She and Jean Hausa couldn't even appear in front of everyone. He had a fiancée. No matter when, the woman standing in front of him wouldn't be her. Sure Mengwan's mood fell to the bottom of the valley. She couldn't recover from that strange feeling. Her body was hugged by someone. Jean Hausa was actually at home today. He followed her gaze and looked out of the window. Do you want to go down and say hello? His warm breath brushed against her neck. She shrank her neck and wanted to escape from his control. However, her body was turned around and pressed against the glass of the sliding door of the balcony. Jean Hausa, don't you need to? No matter what, you're good friends and best friends. Shouldn't it be right to say hello? Jean Hausa. She called his name softly, and her voice was pleading. Don't do this. She absolutely didn't want Su Qingsang to see this side of her. Don't what? He narrowed his eyes and asked her in a low voice. She was only wearing a coat outside, and he easily took it off. She was still wearing yesterday's nightdress, and the thin fabric was easily torn to pieces by him. She could hear his breathing beside her ears. Su Qingsang and Hua Jingyao were downstairs. She felt extremely ashamed. She bit her lip desperately, but she couldn't resist Jean Hausa's domineering attitude. As her body was pushed away by him, a tear fell from the corner of her eye. For the first time, she seriously realized in her heart that the man in front of her was really not the big brother in her impression. Su Qingsang had no idea that in the villa not far in front of them, her good friend was also there. The weather in Qing City had been good these few days. The environment here was good. Walking in it made people feel relaxed and happy. Of course, the most important thing was that Hua Jingyao was by her side. She had been pregnant for 4 months. Her belly was a little bigger than that of an average pregnant woman, who was 4 months pregnant. After all, they were twins, so they were always different. Walking to the osmanthus tree in front of her, Su Qingsang sat down on the rocking chair. The sun in this season didn't shine much, and it gave people a very comfortable feeling. Are you taking a walk in your own neighborhood when you go on a trip? Hua Jingyao looked at Su Qingsang's expression of enjoyment and couldn't help but laugh. She was really too easily satisfied, wasn't she? Can I? The environment here is quite good. I think staying here is quite comfortable. I was going to take you to Luoshan Park in Qing City today. Why don't we go in the afternoon? I'll go later. Su Qingsang blinked. I just want to sit under this osmanthus tree for a while and enjoy the wind. Enjoy this peace. Okay. If you want to enjoy peace, I'll accompany you. Hua Jingyao nodded. He was going to accompany Su Qingsang, so of course she could do whatever she wanted. Su Qingsang smiled. The so-called trip didn't necessarily mean going somewhere and seeing the scenery there. It was also good to change places, slow down, and enjoy this kind of leisure time without doing anything. She raised her hand and was about to stretch, but when her hand was halfway raised, it suddenly froze. She blinked, as if she was a little frightened. What's wrong? Ever since Su Qingsang was pregnant, her every reaction made Hu Jingyao nervous. He looked at Su Qingsang nervously, afraid that she was uncomfortable again. He's moving. Huh. This time, it was Hu Jingyao's turn to be stunned. Who? Him. Su Qingsang was a doctor. Of course, she knew that the fetus would move after 4 months of pregnancy. But this was the first time she felt it, and that feeling was particularly magical. Su Qingsang looked at her abdomen, retracted her hand, and gently placed it on it. He moved again. Hu Jingyao looked at her, and couldn't help but reach out and place his hand on it. He was extremely nervous and stared at his palm with a sacred expression. However, after waiting for a long time, there was no more movement. Why isn't he moving? I don't know. Su Qingsang smiled and deliberately teased him. Maybe it's because you didn't greet him? Was that so? Hu Jingyao frowned slightly. He cleared his throat, and his face suddenly looked a little nervous. Hi, hello. I'm Dad. His serious expression made Su Qingsang laugh. She didn't have time to laugh. The sudden movement in her abdomen stunned Hu Jingyao. He really moved. Silly. Su Qingsang smiled and placed her hand on Hu Jingyao's palm. Feeling the fetal movement in her abdomen from time to time, her expression softened. When the fetal movement stopped, Hu Jingyao retracted his hand and held Su Qingsang's hand instead. Qingsang? Yes. Although Grandpa has to think of the children's names, I thought of 2 nicknames for the 2 children. What? It's called Xiang Xiang and Nian Nian. Whether it's a boy or a girl, these 2 nicknames will be called. Su Qingsang looked at his expression and nodded gently. Okay, very good names. Thank you. She understood what he meant. Hu Jingyao was grateful and leaned over to kiss her abdomen. Su Qingsang's heart softened. Looking at Hu Jingyao's head, she couldn't help but hug him into her arms. I think they will know. Hu Jingkai Hu Wushuang. His brother and sister would know that he missed them so much, and they would understand his immature behavior and the choice he had to make at such a young age. Hu Jingyao didn't say anything. He just hugged Su Qingsang's waist tightly and enjoyed the rare silence. Mount Luo Park in Qing City was built according to Mount Luo, but Mount Luo wasn't a mountain. In ancient times, there was a person named Mount Luo. He was talented, but he once failed the exam 10 times in a row. Later, Mount Luo simply stopped taking the exam. Every day, he only invited a group of scholars to talk about poetry near his residence. He was hospitable and attracted many scholars. With more people, the place became smaller. At that time, there was a minister who liked the literary talent of Mount Luo. He had purposely built this garden. Later, after Qing City began to develop, this place became a scenic spot. It was renamed Mount Luo Park. This was a northern garden with great research value, so almost everyone who came to Qing City would come to Mount Luo Park to play. Su Qingsang had seen many gardens in Jiangnan, but she had rarely seen a garden with such a northern style. This was the first time Su Qingsang and Hu Jingyao entered Mount Luo Park together. Because it wasn't a weekend, there weren't many people here. There was a maple forest in Mount Luo. The maple leaves would only turn red in about half a month. At that time, there would be a lot of tourists. Su Qingsang and Hu Jingyao walked hand in hand on the bluestone path. The environment here is really good. Of course it's good. Hu Jingyao introduced it to Su Qingsang in a low voice. Qing City has many very famous scenic spots. This was once a large trade transit city in the north, so there were many merchants coming and going. There are also a few antique ancient cities here. Although they have been developed in the past few years, they are not very famous. We can slowly walk through them in a few days. Okay. If you can't take it, just tell me. We'll stop and rest. Su Qingsang was pregnant, so she couldn't be too tired. If she had the energy, she would play a little longer. If she didn't, she would go home and rest. Don't worry. You really don't have to worry about me. I'm not a porcelain doll. How can I be so fragile? Even if you're a strong woman, in my heart you're just my wife. He squeezed her hand slightly. A wife who needs my protection. Su Qingsang smiled and leaned over to kiss him on the cheek. Mount Luo Park was very big. Su Qingsang finally wasn't like usual, By evening, she was already a little overwhelmed. Hu Jingyao had been paying attention to Su Qingsang's expression. Seeing her like this, he immediately stopped her from leaving. Let's go back. If you want to come, we'll come again tomorrow. It was rare for Su Qingsang not to be willful. She nodded and left with Hu Jingyao. She originally wanted to go home directly, but after getting into the car, Su Qingsang suddenly wanted to eat hot pot. I don't come here often, but I know there's a hot pot restaurant in the ancient city that's been open for a long time. The taste is good. Let's go there to eat. Ancient city? Is that the one you mentioned just now? Yes, there's a night market inside. After dinner, if you've recovered your energy, you can go shopping. Then I'm going. Su Qingsang liked these old places. She was in high spirits and felt that the fatigue in her body had lessened a lot. Hu Jingyao smiled. The driver drove the car in the direction of the ancient city. Mount Luo Park wasn't too far from the ancient city. They arrived in half an hour. They booked a private room. Su Qingsang was really tired after walking for half a day. After ordering a lot of dishes, she only cared about enjoying the food to her heart's content. She was in charge of eating, and Hu Jingyao was in charge of cooking for her. On the contrary, he didn't eat much. This was a new hobby that Hu Jingyao had developed ever since Su Qingsang became pregnant. He especially liked to feed Su Qingsang and hoped that she could eat more. I'm so full. Su Qingsang was full. She looked at the remaining half of the ingredients and looked at Hu Jingyao. It's a little wasteful. It's not a waste. There's still me. Hu Jingyao didn't mind at all. He put the remaining ingredients into the pot and finished them. Su Qingsang supported her chin with one hand and watched him eat with a faint smile in her eyes. Don't we look like an old married couple? No. Hu Jingyao gave a negative answer without thinking. We're not old at all now. So if you want to be an old married couple, wait until you're a little older. Su Qingsang loved to hear his sweet words. The smile on her face became even brighter. After leaving the hot pot restaurant, they turned to the side and arrived at the ancient city. It was even more lively at night than during the day. Su Qingsang and Hu Jingyao entered the ancient city. The small shops on both sides were very unique. However, such places seemed to be the same in ancient cities all over the country. Su Qingsang would stop to take a look when she encountered something interesting. If she didn't encounter it, she wouldn't look. There was a shop in front. The owner sold her own cloth and clothes. She set up a loom in the shop. It was the kind of old floral cloth and old-fashioned cotton cloth. Su Qingsang was very interested in this. Not only was there old floral cloth, but there were also ethnic clothes made of such cloth. There were also other fabrics, all of which had local ethnic characteristics. Su Qingsang liked the ethnic clothes that the other party had placed at the door very much. She was even more interested when she saw the loom in the shop. She entered the door with Hu Jingyao. A middle-aged woman was sitting in front of the loom, weaving. There were also a few shop assistants. When they saw someone enter, they stood up and greeted them. The moment Su Qingsang looked up, she realized that John Hausa was also here. She was a little surprised. Qing City was a big city, with a population of more than 10 million. It wasn't easy for her to bump into him 2 days in a row. President Hua. When John Hausa saw Hu Jingyao, surprise flashed across his eyes. His subordinates had clearly told him that Hu Jingyao and his wife had gone to Luoshan Park today. Why were they here? President John, what a coincidence. Hu Jingyao felt the same as Su Qingsang. He felt that it was too much of a coincidence. How could they bump into each other everywhere they went? He looked at John Hausa's side. There didn't seem to be anyone else. President John is alone? No. Seeing that the two of them knew each other, the shop assistant who had just come up to greet the two of them immediately became interested. This gentleman is here with his girlfriend. His girlfriend is very beautiful. She just picked out a set of clothes to try on. This beauty has such a good figure. Why don't you pick 2 sets to try on? Su Qingsang noticed that when the shop assistant said the word girlfriend, John Hausa's expression was calm, as if he didn't feel uncomfortable at all. She had just persuaded Shi Mingwan yesterday, and today, she met John Hausa again. Moreover, she met him shopping with a woman? The scenery of the ancient city was indeed good. But she didn't think that based on her impression of Chen Feifei from the 2 times she met her last time, she would come here to shop. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't want to be nosy, she really wanted to see who Zhang Hao's girlfriend was. What kind of stunning woman could make Zhang Hao leave a rich young lady like Chen Feifei behind and come to accompany another woman? Beauty, what do you think of this set? The shop assistant brought over 2 sets of ethnic clothes, her face full of encouragement. These are all designed and made by our shop ourselves. We're the only shop in the entire Qing city. We've all applied for copyrights. Beauty, you're so beautiful. Why don't you try it on? Okay. Su Qingseng didn't refuse. Although she was pregnant now, this set of clothes was loose, so she should be able to wear it. Most importantly, she had a good friend who was a fashion designer. These ethnic clothes with characteristics and personality were all Shi Mengwan's favorite. She could buy a few sets and send them back to Lin City for Shi Mengwan. Su Qingseng took the clothes and was about to walk towards the fitting room, but the shop assistant signaled her to wait. At this time, another shop assistant had already walked to the door of the fitting room. The 2 beauties inside, have you tried on the clothes? I just came in. I'm not done yet. There was a response from one of the rooms, but the other was silent. The shop assistant couldn't help but glance at Zhang Hao. Because there were many people coming and going in a shop like theirs. When there was a lot of traffic, many people would take it away without trying it on. So there were only 2 fitting rooms. The gentleman's girlfriend had been in for a long time, but she didn't answer. Sir, your girlfriend has been in for a long time. Why isn't there any movement? Zhang Hao glanced at the shop assistant, then at Su Qingseng. His expression didn't look too good. My girlfriend takes a long time to change. Is there a problem? No problem, no problem. Zhang Hao's gloomy expression made the shop assistant a little scared. She didn't dare to rush him anymore. Su Qingseng smiled and didn't mind. It's okay. I'll wait a while. As she spoke, she looked at Zhang Hao. President Zhang, there's no need to be in a hurry. We're just here to stroll around. There's no hurry. Hua Jingyao stood at the side and narrowed his eyes at Zhang Hao. His sharp intuition told him that there seemed to be something wrong with Zhang Hao today. He took a step forward and stood in front of Su Qingseng, looking at Zhang Hao. Speaking of which, it's really fate that we can meet President Zhang twice in 2 days. However, I'm surprised that President Zhang has the time to come to a place like the ancient city to play. If I remember correctly, President Zhang should have a lot of work to do now, right? You're welcome. Business is endless. Just like President Hua. Didn't you also put aside your work to accompany your wife out to play? Indeed. Hua Jingyao smiled. Then, can I look forward to the good news from President Zhang? I think President Zhang won't mind buying me a drink when the good news comes, right? Of course. Zhang Hao's expression didn't change, and his face was full of calmness. The shop assistant looked at the 2 of them and couldn't help but ask Su Qingseng if she still wanted to try on the clothes. Chapter 642. Hua Jingyao and Su Qingseng both looked at Zhang Hao. Zhang Hao's expression was rather calm. My girlfriend isn't feeling well today. I'll go and take a look. Excuse me. Go ahead. Hua Jingyao looked at Zhang Hao meaningfully. The shop assistant didn't stop him. Zhang Hao glanced at Su Qingseng and entered the fitting room. Su Qingseng felt that Zhang Hao's reaction was a little strange today, but she didn't know him well. So she didn't know if he had always been like this, or if he was acting like this when he saw them. At the same time, a customer from another room came out. Su Qingseng picked up the clothes, glanced at Hua Jingyao, smiled at him, and went in to try on the clothes. Hua Jingyao gave her a doting look. He signaled her to hurry and change. He was also looking forward to seeing her in such a national costume. In another fitting room that was separated by a wall, Shi Mengwan had already put on the national costume, but she leaned against the wall and didn't have the courage to walk out. She never thought that because she was in a bad mood, she would be dragged out to the night market in the ancient city by Zhang Hao and meet Su Qingseng. It was such a coincidence that they entered the same store. Yes, she was a fashion designer, and Su Qingseng was her best friend. The 2 of them were very similar in some aspects. For example, what they liked to eat, and where they liked to go, including their favorite style of clothing. She was a fashion designer, and this kind of store could give her the most inspiration. Similarly, if Su Qingsang, who was in Qing City, passed by such a shop, she would definitely come in and take a look. She didn't hear Su Qingsang's voice until she finished changing. She had planned to go out, so she had to stay in the fitting room. When she heard that John Hauze wanted to come and take a look, her heart was in her throat. But when John Hauze knocked on the door, she had to open the door and let him in. Her body was almost completely hidden behind the door, and the narrow door couldn't hide her at all. She looked at the wall. Even though she knew that Su Qingsang was in the fitting room next door, she was afraid that Hu Jinyao would see her. When John Hauze entered the door, he found that Shi Mengwan's face was very pale. She didn't even dare to make a sound. After all, the soundproofing here was very bad. Next to him was Su Qingsang. She looked at John Hauze with panic, eagerness, and embarrassment in her eyes. Even if the neighbor was her best friend, she didn't have the courage to let Su Qingsang know that she had become a mistress that she despised, but was ultimately a fact. John Hauze took a step forward and said softly, "Are you okay?" How could Shi Mengwan make a sound? She bit her lip and glared at John Hauze. The man in front of her had caused her to fall into such a situation. The resentment in her eyes was so obvious. John Hauze curled his lips and his gaze swept over Shi Mengwan. She had chosen a set of Uyghur clothing. The bright red color contrasted with her snow-white skin. Her appearance was very beautiful, but it wasn't the kind of beauty that could overwhelm others. She really did look like a Uyghur girl with this set of clothes. John Hauze narrowed his eyes slightly and took a step forward. Shi Mengwan instinctively took a step back. Behind her was the wall, so she had nowhere to retreat. John Hauze moved closer to her, tilted his head, and kissed her lips. Shi Mengwan's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that he actually dared to do such a thing to her in the fitting room. She reached out to push him, but he bit her lips. His lips moved to the right, turned to her ear, and bit her earlobe. Afraid of being heard? He spoke in a whisper so soft that only they could hear him. However, Shi Mengwan always had a sense of fear that someone would find out. She admitted defeat and looked at John Hauze, hoping that he would stop. "What do you think would happen if I took you right here?" His hot breath made her neck hot, but his words made her heart cold. She didn't even dare to make a sound. She could only stare at him with her eyes wide open, as if he had gone crazy. John Hauze didn't look at her terrified expression. His big hand gently moved down the lines of her back, and finally landed on her waist. "You look very beautiful in this outfit." He wasn't stingy with his own problems, but Shi Mengwan wasn't happy at all. She raised her hand to push John Hauze. Her hands were restrained by him, and they were restrained behind her. "Are you afraid?" Shi Mengwan was about to cry. This man was a robber. That's enough. She didn't dare to make a sound. She could only speak silently, her eyes full of accusation. John Hauze saw the anxiety in her eyes. His hand moved down again, and gently pressed on her waist, bringing her body into his arms. "If you don't want me to want you here, then beg me." Shameless. Shi Mengwan refused, but in the next second, John Hauze actually reached out to the hem of her clothes. "I beg you." Shi Mengwan sucked in a breath of cold air. She was really afraid of him, afraid that he was serious. She hadn't forgotten the sensational dressing incident last year. She definitely didn't want to become the female lead of such an incident. "Your begging really doesn't have any sincerity." John Hauze changed sides and kissed her neck. Like a vampire, he bit her neck lightly. After letting go, he bit her heavily again. A slight pain came from her neck. She didn't even dare to scream. She could only push him hard. He wasn't moved, and she stubbornly resisted. In the end, he retreated and stroked the red mark with his fingertips. His gaze was deep. He whispered against her forehead, "If you listen to me tonight, I'll let you go. How about that?" Shi Mengwan pursed her lips into a straight line. What could she say at this time? What could she do? She couldn't resist. This man was a lunatic. She was really afraid that she would have a dressing incident. She could only nod. The moment she nodded lightly, she felt her eyes sting and swollen. A bitter feeling filled her heart. He didn't respect her at all. What did he take her for? Why could he treat her with such a bad attitude on such an occasion, and in such a place? Jean Hauser looked at her red eyes and suddenly leaned over. He pressed her body against the wall and kissed her lips crazily. Sure, Mengwan wanted to scream, but she couldn't. She didn't dare to. She looked at Jean Hauser. He was clearly her dear brother, so why could he treat her like this? She still remembered that her dear brother thought about her everything and protected her at all times. Why exactly did things turn out like this? She reached out her hand to push him. She was very afraid. She was afraid that he would really give her a dressing incident. She would definitely go crazy. However, she couldn't defeat him at all. He kissed her lips almost ferociously. Her lips were red and swollen from being ravaged. She couldn't escape. She couldn't help but tear up from the corner of her eyes. Jean Hauser's plundering action stopped for a moment. He looked at her watery eyes, and her wronged expression made his heart tremble. His lips moved up and kissed away her tear. This kiss was much gentler than before. The kiss landed on her lips again. It was extremely lingering, tossing and turning. Sure, Mengwan couldn't sink into it. She only felt nervous and afraid. Jean Hauser probably felt bored. He finally retreated and let her go. Sure, Mengwan's legs went limp, and she was about to fall to the ground. He easily hugged her and fixed her body. Please. Sure, Mengwan believed that he could understand her silent plea. She didn't want to do this, but the situation was stronger than her. Ever since she got entangled with Jean Hauser again, she discovered that he was domineering in his bones, as well as a ruthless and sinister side. Jean Hauser took a deep look at her, then raised his hand and carried her in his arms. Jean. Sure, Mengwan only said one word before she stopped. She was extremely afraid. What exactly did he want to do? She lowered her voice. In order not to let others hear her, she had no choice but to move her lips close to his ear. She used a suppressed voice that she didn't dare to make a sound at all. Jean Hauser, what are you trying to do? If he dared to carry her out like this, she would definitely fight him to the death. She definitely would. What are you nervous about? Jean Hauser stared at her pale face and swept his gaze across her long dress. Remember, you owe me again. As he spoke, he raised his leg and fixed her body slightly. Then, he pulled the clothes she had changed out of from the hook with one hand and covered her head with it. Sure, Mengwan couldn't see outside anymore. Jean Hauser picked her up again, opened the door and walked out. As soon as he walked out, he met Hua Jinyao's gaze. Jean Hauser's footsteps paused for a moment. He was holding a person in his arms. The hand on Sure Mengwan's body pressed down on the corner of her shirt. This action was very subtle, but Hua Jinyao saw it. President Jean, this is... Excuse me, President Hua. My girlfriend isn't feeling well. I'll take her back first. Do you need help? Hua Jinyao looked very enthusiastic. My driver is right outside. If President Jean needs it, I can ask him to take you to the hospital first. There's no need to trouble yourself. I drove here. Jean Hauser's voice was indifferent. As he spoke, he glanced outside the shop. Immediately, a bodyguard followed him in and paid the money. Jean Hauser only nodded slightly at Hua Jinyao and left with Sure Mengwan in his arms. From beginning to end, Sure Mengwan's upper body was covered by clothes. Not only could he not see her face, but even half of her body was covered. The only thing that could be clearly seen was the elegant red skirt. There were also those slender ankles. It could be seen that the woman Jean Hauser was carrying should be relatively thin. Jean Hauser walked to the door of the shop. From Hua Jinyao's direction, he could see that the woman's hands were tightly wrapped around Jean Hauser's neck. There was also the face that was buried in Jean Hauser's arms and covered by clothes. Not even her hair was exposed. The woman couldn't see anything, but Jean Hauser's actions of protecting the woman from the beginning to the end could be seen clearly. Hua Jinyao pursed his lips slightly. He didn't have much contact with Jean Hauser. They had worked together twice in Lin City before. They had also met a few times in Qing City. Whether it was the Zhan family in Tianyu or the Chen family in Lin City, they had all worked together. In his memory, he had met Jean Hauser several times. When he was with Chen Feifei, he had never seen Jean Hauser so careful with a woman. No matter who that woman was, to be able to make Jean Hauser so nervous, it really made him curious to see who exactly the other party was. Zhang Haoze had already stepped out of the shop when Su Qingsang changed her clothes and came out. Coincidentally, the clothes she chose were the same type as what Shi Mengwan was wearing just now. However, Shi Mengwan was wearing red, while Su Qingsang was wearing yellow. As soon as she came out, she glanced at the door. From the corner of her eye, she only had time to see the red skirt disappear outside the door. He left. She had heard it from inside just now. When she saw Hua Jinyao's affirmative expression, she was a little gossipy. That woman left too. She was really sorry. She seemed to have heard some movement next door just now. She had no choice. This shop wasn't big to begin with, and the soundproofing couldn't be very good. At the thought of Zhang Haoze doing something embarrassing with that woman next door, her mood was a little complicated. Yes. How does she look? Is she prettier than Chen Feifei? She really didn't mean to be so gossipy. She purely wanted to find out and tell Shi Mengwan about the situation, so that she would give up earlier. I didn't see her. Hua Jinyao didn't care about Zhang Haoze. He also didn't care about what kind of woman Zhang Haoze had. He looked at Su Qingsang with eyes full of admiration. Su Qingsang also realized that she was too gossipy. She shrugged and turned the page about Zhang Haoze. Anyway, he already had other women, and more than one. She believed that he and Shi Mengwan should be no different. She was shopping with Hua Jinyao today. She didn't want to be in a bad mood because of others. Do I look good? Su Qingsang turned in a circle in front of Hua Jinyao. The hem of her skirt fluttered in the wind. She didn't look like a woman who was 4 months pregnant at all. Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded. Su Qingsang looked at herself in the mirror, and also felt that she looked quite good. I suddenly realized that I can wear this to take a set of photos next time. What do you think? Okay. Hua Jinyao unconditionally supported any decision Su Qingsang made. How about I help you collect all the clothes from 56 ethnic groups? Do you want to wear every set? Su Qingsang was amused by his words. Mr. Hua, do you want to spoil me? Yes. Hua Jinyao openly admitted. I just want to spoil you. This way, you will never be able to escape from my hands. Enough. He wasn't afraid of being laughed at for saying such mushy words in this crowded shop. Knowing that she was shy, Hua Jinyao didn't say anything else. Su Qingsang changed out of the clothes, thought for a moment, and bought a total of 3 sets. Actually, what about this set of clothes? It's just for posing and taking a photo. It's too exaggerated to wear it out like this. Su Qingsang watched the shop assistant wrap up the clothes and say this when she brought them over. Then why did you buy so many? Yes, I bought them and sent them to Mengwan. She must like them. That was what Su Qingsang thought when she first saw it. As long as you're happy, let's go. After buying the clothes, Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang left the shop. Someone naturally carried the things to the car behind them. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao continued shopping. It was a little cold at night. Su Qingsang rubbed her arms. Let's go back. Hua Jinyao looked at the time. Anyway, we'll be here for the next few days. You can come whenever you want. Okay. Su Qingsang yawned. She was really a little tired. Usually, her physical strength wouldn't be so poor. But after all, she was pregnant. When she got home, Su Qingsang received a call from Li Qianxue. She knew that she was playing outside. Although she wouldn't say that she was messing around, she was still a little worried. Su Qingsang repeatedly explained that her current schedule was very easy, much easier than working in the hospital. Hearing this, Li Qianxue became nervous again. Is working in the hospital very tiring? Why don't you rest? You can go to work anytime anyway. Mom, stop fooling around. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh and say, Mom, when you were pregnant, you continued to work as usual, right? You didn't say that you would stop working as soon as you were pregnant and do nothing, did you? Of course. Not only did I continue to work, but I also tried my best. I had to do my best. Her voice was very calm, but Su Qingsang immediately understood the meaning behind it. At that time, Li Qianxue was probably trying her best to prove herself to Su Qinghui, right? Mom, you and Mr. Wei, I have nothing to do with him. Don't worry about me. Take good care of the fetus, and give birth to the child safely. Li Qianxue had no intention of getting married again, Nor did she have any intention of provoking any man, especially a man like Wei Ting, who was so much younger than her and didn't look reliable at all. Got it, Mom. Before hanging up the phone, Su Qingsang still told Li Qianxue her thoughts. Mom, actually, I think even if it's not that Mr. Wei, there can be other men. You're still so young, you can totally start a new life. Alright. Li Qianxue was defeated by her daughter. I told you not to worry about me. Why are you still talking about it? Just take good care of yourself and give birth to the child. That's the most important thing now. After hanging up the phone, Su Qingsang sent a video request to Shi Mengwan. In the end, the other party didn't accept. Su Qingsang later called Shi Mengwan, but no one picked up. After thinking about it, she sent her a message and told her that she had bought a few sets of ethnic clothes. Whether it was the color scheme or the style, they were all good. She had already sent them to her studio directly. However, after the message was sent, there was still no reply. This time, she didn't even call her back. Su Qingsang's brows furrowed slightly. It can't be that something happened, right? What's wrong? Hua Jinyao came out of the bathroom and saw Su Qingsang holding her phone in a daze. He went forward and hugged her waist. Why didn't you rest after taking a shower? Why did you come to the balcony to feel the cold wind? No, I'm calling my mom. Su Qingsang thought of Shi Mengwan again. I don't know what Wanwan is busy with. She hasn't picked up my call. She hasn't replied to my message either. It's already so late. Maybe she's already asleep. Maybe. Although Shi Mengwan was a workaholic, she also took good care of her body. Other than when she had to rush, she still went to bed on time most of the time. Chapter 643. Although Shi Mengwan was lucky enough to escape today, she didn't let Su Qingsang see her with Zhang Haoze. But until she left the ancient city, she didn't feel at ease. She felt as if she was being roasted on a fire. Even when she got home, Shi Mengwan didn't recover from the shame she felt in the fitting room. This also directly led to the fact that when Zhang Haoze approached her, she refused to give him any face at all. All her tolerance and concession were based on the fact that she was convinced that the man in front of her was her dear brother. But if this dear brother was no longer the young man who protected her wholeheartedly, and was no longer the dear brother in her heart, should she continue to persevere? Today's situation could be said to be an accident, but as long as she didn't break up with Zhang Haoze, it wouldn't change the fact that she was Zhang Haoze's secret lover. Especially when he had a fiancé by his side. She suddenly felt a pain on her shoulder. She realized that Zhang Haoze was biting her again. She didn't reach out. Her hands were tied by Zhang Haoze. Zhang Haoze. Ever since this guy came back, he said that she promised him that she would listen to him tonight. She was already very cooperative. Not only did she impulsively peel herself off like a newborn baby, she even took the initiative to wash herself clean and lie on the bed. She hated that he had tied her hands up for the sake of the so-called fun. She was like a fish on a chopping board, unable to move at all. Zhang Haoze looked at her angry face. When she was angry, she looked even more beautiful than usual. He couldn't help but think of the first time she was under him. She was clearly afraid and hesitant. But she was like a sacrifice. Her eyes were bright and beautiful. Her eyes were beautiful. Beautiful but not seductive, delicate but not seductive. However, it was precisely such a woman who gave people a very sexy feeling. Focus. He kissed the faint bite mark. Otherwise, I won't bite here next time. Pervert. Shi Mengwan couldn't help but speak. Zhang Haoze leaned over and bit the bite mark again, deepening the mark. Shi Mengwan was in pain and couldn't even scream. Her phone rang at this moment. She turned her face and saw Su Qingsang's smiling face on the flickering screen. At this moment, Zhang Haoze reached out and picked up her phone. Zhang Haoze put it down. Zhang Haoze looked at the video call request and shook his phone. Do you need me to connect it for you? Zhang Haoze. What did she look like now? How could he dare to let Su Qingsang see it? Zhang Haoze looked at her panicked face and raised the phone to the side. Staring at the resistance in Shi Mengwan's eyes, he leaned down again. Since you're afraid of letting others know, then do something to satisfy me. As he spoke, he untied her hands. When Shi Mengwan's hand regained its freedom, the first thing she did was to grab her phone. Unfortunately, before she could touch the phone, Jean Hausa had already grabbed her hand. The phone screen darkened. Shi Mengwan bit her lip. "Give me back my phone." He didn't give it to her. Instead, he tossed the phone to the side and pressed the mute button. He covered Shi Mengwan's body again. "You said that you would listen to me tonight." This was something she had agreed to in the fitting room. Shi Mengwan didn't lose her memory, so of course she knew what he was talking about. Her lips were pursed into a straight line. She didn't move, and Jean Hausa wasn't in a hurry. He just propped his hands on both sides of her body and stared at her. In the end, Shi Mengwan was defeated. She gritted her teeth, raised her hand, and put it around his shoulder. For Su Qingsang, the next few days in Qing City were very relaxing. Hua Jinyao had arranged everything. She only needed to bring him along to enjoy a comfortable trip. The two of them didn't stay in Qing City for long. A week. The two of them visited all the famous scenic spots in Qing City. After returning to Lin City, Su Qingsang went back to work after resting for a day. As usual, she brought a bunch of Qing City's specialties into the hospital. She was pregnant and married into a family like the Hua family. Even if she didn't work, no one would say anything. However, Su Qingsang still insisted on outpatient services every day and participated in surgeries, just like before she was pregnant. She was highly praised in the hospital for this. In fact, in a big environment like China, almost all doctors in first-tier cities didn't leave the front line for minor injuries. However, because Su Qingsang was Hua Jinyao's wife, people felt that it wasn't easy for her to do this. As Su Qingsang's belly grew bigger, it became more and more stable. The morning sickness was gone. There was still some nausea, but at least her appetite was good. During this period, Lu Tongjia often brought Auntie Zhou over to make soup for Su Qingsang, or invited her back to the old mansion for dinner. Li Qinxue also flew to Rong City twice to see her. Every time she came, she brought big and small bags. As Su Qingsang's belly grew bigger and bigger, the things they bought began to be used for the baby. The two baby rooms that were specially cleaned up were already filled with things sent by the elders. Hua Jinyao almost didn't go out to socialize anymore. When he was free, he would go home. When he was free, he would accompany Su Qingsang for a walk and talk to the child in her stomach. Ever since Su Qingsang's last fetal movement, he especially liked to talk to the child in her stomach. Every time, he would introduce himself very solemnly, saying that he was the father, so that the children would remember his voice. Su Qingsang didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she also felt very touched. More than 3 months had passed, and Su Qingsang had already been pregnant for 8 months. Because she had a month off this year, the new year was a little later than usual. When Su Qingsang was 8 months pregnant, her belly was already very big. Not to mention Hua Jinyao. Even Sun Huiya told her not to go to work anymore. She had stopped doing surgeries a long time ago. Her belly was too big, and there was no way for her to stand on the stage. She still accepted outpatient services. But as the month got older, Su Qingsang's belly became bigger than the average pregnant woman. Sun Huiya tried her best to arrange some easy work for her. Seeing that it was almost the spring festival, Hua Jinyao discussed with the elders of the Hua family and asked Su Qingsang to apply for leave directly. Su Qingsang didn't object. She picked a day and asked the driver to send her to the hospital to go through the leave procedures. Hua Jinyao was especially worried about her now, but she was very insistent, so he could only let her go. He only asked her to finish the procedures and go home quickly. Su Qingsang sometimes thought that Hua Jinyao was very funny. Where could she go with a big belly? She wasn't someone who would mess around with herself. She asked the driver to accompany her, finished the procedures and went home. From now on, she would officially rest. Su Qingsang, who was on leave, was asked by old Master Hua to move back to the old mansion. Firstly, it was convenient to take care of her. Secondly, the place was bigger, and the environment was better. It was more suitable for nurturing the fetus. Su Qingsang didn't refuse this time. Hua Jinyao had to work during the day. Although Auntie Yu was at home, she was pregnant with twins after all. The situation was different. If she had to give birth early, there would be more people at the old mansion. Su Qingsang thought that she wouldn't be used to it, but after moving here, she realized that she wasn't uncomfortable. Every morning, she would be very sleepy and often couldn't get up. When she moved here, no one would wake her up. After eating, she would read in the garden for a while. Although she didn't go to work, she still had to master the skills that she should master and learn. The winter in Rome City was very cold. If she wanted to go out for a walk, she had to wrap herself up like a ball. Lu Tongjia was very worried about her. Every time she wanted to go out for a walk, she had to accompany her. Later, she felt that it wasn't enough to follow her alone, so she brought Xiao Xia and Xiao Jiang to follow her. Su Qingsang wore a thick down jacket and walked on the path outside the Hua family's old mansion. Looking at Lu Tongjia holding her hand, she couldn't help but laugh. "Mom, I'm only 8 months pregnant. It's still too early to give birth. You don't have to be so nervous." "I'm not nervous." Although Lu Tongjia said that, she held her hand quite tightly. "Let me tell you, although this road is flat, you still have to be careful when you walk. If you ask me, you shouldn't take a walk. Just stay at home. Look at how cold it is." "Mom." Su Qingsang didn't object to her concern, but she said, "I'm a doctor. Walking properly will help with the delivery. And you know it's not good for pregnant women to stay at home all the time. You're a doctor. If you say so." Lu Tongjia couldn't refute her words. With a daughter-in-law who was a doctor, she felt that her previous experience with pregnancy was completely useless. "But why did I hear that twins can't walk all the time?" "Mom, pregnant women's physiques are different, so the situation is naturally different. This needs to be treated differently. Don't be too nervous." "How can I not be nervous? You're not having one, you're having two." Two. Lu Tongjia even emphasized her tone. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh. "Mom, strictly speaking, it's actually easier to have two than one. After all, the fetus can't be as big as a single fetus." When she went for a prenatal checkup last time, Sun Huiya also said that her children were all normal, but not particularly big. If possible, she suggested that it was better for her to give birth naturally. It was also good for her body's recovery. Su Qingsang understood these principles. If possible, she hoped that she could give birth naturally. If it wasn't allowed to go smoothly, she would let Sun Huiya perform the surgery. As the Spring Festival approached, the atmosphere of the Hua family became more and more intense. Su Qingsang had nothing to do, so she stuck Spring Festival couplets and hung window flowers. Because Old Master Hua was around, these traditional customs were carried out every year in the Hua family. When she was putting up the couplets, Su Qingsang suddenly thought of Xiang Kaiping. Last New Year, she was with Xiang Kaiping. At that time, she already knew that she wasn't her mother, but she planned to treat her as her biological mother. However, she didn't expect those things to happen later. She knew that Li Qinxue wouldn't like her to visit Xiang Kaiping. Her belly was getting bigger, and it wasn't convenient for her to go out. When Hua Jinyao returned home, she told him and asked someone to send something over to Xiang Kaiping. New Year's Eve. It was Su Qingsang's first time staying up with such a big family. This experience was also quite novel. Hua Jinyao had successfully taken control of Tianyu Group. Whether it was Hua Mingliang or Hua Mingmei, they worked in Tianyu Group and could get dividends, but Hua Jinyao's shares were almost overwhelming. Even if they were dissatisfied, they couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, the big family looked quite lively, at least on the surface. On the first day of the new year, Su Qingsang, who was supposed to get up early, got up late. However, no one would wake her up at this time. When she went downstairs, she saw Li Qinxue, Su Yusen, and Old Master Li rushing over. Su Qingsang almost suspected that she was still asleep. "Grandpa, Mom, Yusen?" Su Qingsang was so happy to see Li Qinxue and the others. The last time Li Qinxue came to see her was more than a month ago. Now that she saw Su Qingsang, she felt that she had put on a little weight, and her belly seemed to be a little bigger. Yes, I came to see you. I wanted to come yesterday, but after all, there were some things to deal with at home, so we came over early this morning." "Why? You don't welcome me?" Welcome. Su Yusen looked at Su Qingsang's belly. The two siblings often had video calls and often interacted. However, this was the first time he saw Su Qingsang's belly. Are all pregnancies so scary? Yusin, what are you talking about? Li Qianxue glared at her son. Su Yusin shrugged. It's quite scary. I don't think anyone else's belly is so big. I'm a twin, so of course my belly is bigger. Su Qingsang looked at Su Yusin. The two of them hadn't seen each other for almost half a year. She felt that Su Yusin seemed to be a little taller and stronger. It seems that the university is indeed a plastic surgery hospital. Yusin seems to be more handsome. Of course. Su Yusin was quite arrogant, but after all he was in the Hua family, so he still restrained himself. Old Master Li, who had been silent, looked at Su Qingsang with obvious worry in his eyes. This belly is so big. Have you checked it? What did the doctor say? Grandpa. Every time Su Qingsang heard this, she was speechless. I'm a doctor myself. Don't worry, there's no problem. Really? Old Master Li looked at Li Qianxue. She had given birth to 2 children, but her belly didn't seem to be so big. Really? Su Qingsang had gotten used to the feeling of being doubted by the whole family in the past few months. But she still explained very seriously. Old Master Hua looked at the family and asked them to sit down. Su Qingsang looked at the Hua family sitting on the left, and then at the Li family sitting on the right. Suddenly, she felt that life was perfect at this point. On the night of the first day of the new year, it unexpectedly snowed in Rong City. This was the first snow of the new year. When Su Qingsang got up in the morning, she looked at the silver outside the window and couldn't help but put on a down jacket and run out to see the snow. Hua Jinyao didn't have time to stop her. He quickly put on his coat and followed her. Qingsang, let me help you. It had been snowing all night, and the snow was very thick. It was almost up to her calves. Su Qingsang didn't step out. She just stood in the corridor. There was no snow under the eaves, and the road leading outside had been cleaned by Uncle Cheng and his men early this morning. But she could see the thick snow on both sides. Didn't you see it when you came to Rong City? Why do you still look like a country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world? Yes, I'm a country bumpkin. I just like to see it snow. Su Qingsang made a face at him. Hua Jinyao couldn't help but laugh. Su Qingsang had improved since she was pregnant, but she was becoming more and more like a little girl in front of him. I want to go build a snowman. Su Qingsang was about to walk into the garden as she spoke. Hua Jinyao didn't dare to let her do it. I'll help you build it. Just stay here. But I want to do it myself. Don't be willful. You don't want the child to freeze, do you? I'm wearing so much. After Su Qingsang said that, she also knew that she was being willful. Okay, then I'll watch you build it, okay? Okay. Hua Jinyao was satisfied with this. He walked towards the garden. There was a lot of snow on both sides. Let's build a panda. Su Qingsang suddenly had an idea. For too big and too small, okay? Hua Jinyao looked at her helplessly and went to do it. Su Qingsang watched him build the shape of the first snowman and couldn't help but step forward. Don't move. Just stand under the corridor. This road is very slippery last night. My shoes are non-slip. Su Qingsang took 2 more steps forward. At this time, Li Qianxue had already gotten up and came out. She didn't find her daughter in the room, but she saw Su Qingsang outside in the cold wind through the window. She was so nervous that she ran out. Qingsang, what are you doing? Mom! Su Qingsang heard Li Qianxue's voice and turned around. This action was very normal, but Su Qingsang forgot that she was pregnant. She turned around too quickly, and she lost her balance. Hua Jinyao, who was about to fall into the snow, was scared out of his wits when he saw this scene. He quickly rushed over and caught Su Qingsang's body. Be careful. As Hua Jinyao spoke, he helped Su Qingsang stand steadily. Li Qianxue also walked over. How old are you? Why are you still so immature? If you want to see the snow and make a snowman, just stay inside and watch. I got it. Mom. Su Qingsang begged for mercy and wanted Li Qianxue to stop talking, but Li Qianxue felt that it wasn't enough. You know your current state. Stop looking at the snow. Come, let's go in. After saying this, she glared at Hua Jinyao and said, You too. She's messing around, and you're messing around too? Hua Jinyao knew that he was in the wrong, so he quickly helped Su Qingsang inside. Su Qingsang stuck out her tongue and looked at Li Qinshua's back guiltily. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang helplessly, signaling her not to go against Li Qinshui at this time. He helped Su Qingsang into the house. When they went up the steps of the corridor, he thought that Su Qingsang could stand steadily, but Su Qingsang suddenly put her entire body weight on Hua Jinyao. Qingsang? Su Qingsang's hand was on her abdomen. Her expression was a little pale. Li Qinshui, who was in front, had already turned around and saw that her expression was not right. Qingsang? Are you okay? Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang shook her head and tried her best to maintain her composure. I might be giving birth. Chapter 644. Not only him, but Li Qinshui was also surprised. Standing at the side, he couldn't react for a moment. Qingsang, are you going to give birth? Hua Jinyao, who was dumbfounded, asked again. Su Qingsang couldn't answer his question. She grabbed his arm tightly and said, Quick, take me to the hospital. Hua Jinyao said those words through gritted teeth, as if he had finally come to his senses. Hospital? Yes, the hospital. Quick, I'll carry you to the hospital. He couldn't care less about Li Qinshui, who was standing by the side. He picked up Su Qingsang and walked towards the parking lot. Li Qinshui wanted to stop them, but she slapped her forehead and quickly went back into the house to tell the Hua and Li families the news. Hua Jinyao almost wanted to fly to the hospital, but it had snowed the day before. No matter how hard he tried, he had to consider the road conditions. Unable to increase his speed, he became more and more nervous, especially when he saw Su Qingsang's pale face. What do you think? Qingsang, are you in pain? Bear with it. It won't take long. Although it was said to be fast, it was impossible to drive fast on this snowy road. Su Qingsang only had a stomachache. She knew that she was still far from being able to live. Seeing Hua Jinyao's pale face, she still tried to comfort him. Hua Jinyao, you forgot one thing. What? You didn't bring the delivery bag. The delivery kit had been prepared at home, but Hua Jinyao had only been focused on taking her to the hospital and hadn't brought it with him. Then what should we do? Hua Jinyao didn't even dare to slam on the brakes and slowed down the car. His face was full of anxiety. What should we do? Don't be so nervous. Don't worry, my mom will bring it over. Now you just have to concentrate on driving. Drive, yes, drive. Hua Jinyao focused on driving again, but he couldn't help it. From time to time, he would turn his face to look at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang's stomach hurt. In order to distract herself, she took out her phone and called Sun Huiya. She told her that she might be in labor. He was relieved when he got Sun Huiya's confirmation that she would rush to the hospital immediately. He hung up the phone and looked out of the car window. It snowed in Rong City, and the whole city was covered in silver, like a fairy tale world. The pain in her abdomen began to intensify. She adjusted her breathing and tried to calm herself down. Hua Jinyao rushed to the hospital as soon as possible. Hua Jinyao often came to the first hospital, and so did the obstetrics and gynecology department. But he had never been so anxious and flustered in this place before. He ran all the way with Su Qingsang in his arms. Sun Huiya lived close to the hospital, so she had already arrived. In addition to Sun Huiya, there were also Deputy Chief Shen Lingyun, Yang Lu, Ling Fei, Li Ting, and some experienced doctors. Su Qingsang was pregnant with twins. If possible, she wanted to give birth naturally. However, they had to examine Su Qingsang first. Sun Huiya arranged for Su Qingsang to do some basic checkups, and Hua Jinyao accompanied her the whole time. After the examination, Sun Huiya and Su Qingsang looked at the various data together. Qingsang, you're doing well. Try to have a natural birth. Okay. Su Qingsang was a doctor herself, so she didn't need Sun Huiya to say anything. She cooperated with her the whole time. Soon the rest of the Hua family arrived. Old Master Hua, Hua Mingguang and his wife, and the Li family. Li Qinshui looked at Su Qingsang, her eyes full of worry. Qingsang, how are you? Would it work? Why don't we cut it open? Li Qinshui didn't care about anything else. She only wanted her daughter to be fine. Mom. Su Qingsang was actually really in pain. But Li Qinshua's concern made her feel warm and a little helpless. Dr. Sun said that the situation is very good. I can give birth on my own. Don't try to persuade me. But, Mom, don't worry. I'm a doctor myself. I know what's best. I won't joke around with my body. Then, I want to go in with you. Mom, don't accompany me. Grandpa is still here. Don't you want to accompany Grandpa? Don't worry. Director Sun and Director Shen are very experienced. They have also delivered mini twins. There's no problem at all. Don't worry. No matter how worried Li Qianxue was, she could only choose to believe Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang planned to go into the delivery room. She had been there many times. Every time, she gave birth to someone else's child. This was the first time she went in to give birth herself. Qingsang. Hua Jinyao went forward and held her hand. Qingsang, how are you? Does it still hurt? Can you give birth on your own? Is there a problem? Will it be dangerous? I often see on TV that it's difficult to give birth. Why don't you listen to your mother and have a C-section? Are you scared? Su Qingsang's question was a joke. It was the first time she had seen Hua Jinyao so incoherent and nervous. She was joking, but Hua Jinyao nodded very seriously. Yes, I'm so scared. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. Hua Jinyao held her hand tightly. I'm really scared. Qingsang, you'll be fine, right? Of course. It was the first time Su Qingsang had seen Hua Jinyao so panicked. Her stomach was hurting, but because of his reaction, she felt that the pain wasn't as intense as before. Director Sun is here. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao's state. She had originally wanted him to accompany her into the delivery room. But looking at him now, she gave up. Just wait outside. No. Hua Jinyao was very determined. I want to go in with you. Are you sure? Su Qingsang was quite calm. Actually, you don't need to go in with me. Be it Chief Sun or Chief Shen. They were both very experienced doctors. With them here, I'll definitely be fine. I want to go in with you. Hua Jinyao was very persistent. Su Qingsang nodded. Okay. Then don't cause any trouble later. I promise I won't. Hua Jinyao raised 3 fingers and promised. However, when he really entered the delivery room, Hua Jinyao realized that his promise seemed to have been made too early. Su Qingsang was very calm. This calmness was even calmer than when she was on the operating table. She slept on the delivery bed and listened to Sun Hui's instructions. Later, when I tell you to use force, you can use force. Okay. Su Qingsang was in so much pain that her face turned pale. However, Hua Jinyao's face was even paler than hers. Honey, if you're in pain, you can bite my hand. Hua Jinyao grabbed her hand very tightly. It was obvious that he was very nervous. In contrast to his nervousness, Su Qingsang was calm. Why would I bite your hand for no reason? Aren't you in pain? I can bear it. Don't bear it. You'd better bite me. Su Qingsang took a deep breath. Hua Jinyao, calm down. Don't forget that I'm a doctor. Oh. Hua Jinyao watched as her face became paler and paler, her breathing became heavier, and the sweat on her forehead increased. Honey, are you really not going to bite me? Sun Huiya had already started to prepare for the delivery. Seeing Hua Jinyao like this, she inexplicably wanted to laugh. She held back. Shut up. Su Qingsang glared at him. Don't speak. Qingsang, you can start using force now. Su Qingsang began to use force. She didn't scream like an ordinary pregnant woman. That wouldn't help, and it would also cause her to lose strength. When Sun Huiya told her to use force, she used force. When she told her to relax, she relaxed. Very good, that's it. Come, take a deep breath and use force. Su Qingsang was using force, but she felt that Hua Jinyao's breathing was getting heavier and heavier. Sweetheart. Hua Jinyao had never felt so weak in his 31 years of life as he did today. He held Su Qingsang's hand tightly. Why isn't the child out yet? Su Qingsang didn't have the time to talk to him. She finally realized that letting Hua Jinyao in was a mistake. I can already see the head. Qingsang, don't be distracted. Use force. Hua Jinyao became more and more nervous. Su Qingsang could even feel that her wrist was about to turn red from his pinching. She was in great pain. Not only did it hurt below, but it also hurt above. Hua Jinyao, let go of me. She gritted her teeth and said, but her voice was too soft. Hua Jinyao didn't hear her at all. His attention was completely attracted by Sun Hui's words. Qingsang, did you hear that? The child is coming out. Su Qingsang didn't want to talk to him anymore. She wanted to break free from his hand and use force. She felt something coming out of her body. It's coming out, it's coming out. It's a boy. Congratulations. Sun Huiya carried the child out, and Hua Jinyao's grip tightened. Qingsang, did you hear that? It's coming out, it's coming out. Su Qingsang didn't want to talk to him anymore. She had ears. She could hear it herself. Wah! She heard the sound of the child crying. However, she didn't have time to relax. Her stomach hurt even more. She had been in pain for too long. So long that she couldn't hold on any longer. Sun Huiya's expression was solemn. She placed her hand on Su Qingsang's stomach and looked at Su Qingsang's pale and exhausted face. Qingsang, you can't relax. There's another one in your stomach. Hua Jinyao's happiness didn't last for more than 10 seconds. Sun Huiya's words made him nervous. There's another one. Yes. Sun Huiya had also delivered twins before. She had a lot of experience. Qingsang, you should rest for a while. Take a rest first. We'll start exerting ourselves later to give birth to the other child. Okay. Su Qingsang was weak. She had already exhausted most of her strength just now. Now, she really didn't have any strength. Ling Fei took the warm water that she had prepared early in the morning and gave it to Su Qingsang. She took 2 sips and closed her eyes to rest. Qingsang, you can't fall asleep. Sun Huiya was afraid that she would fall asleep. Wait a minute. I'll help you check the condition of the other child now. Su Qingsang couldn't say anything. She could only nod weakly. Hua Jinyao looked at her current state and felt extremely sorry for her. He held Su Qingsang's hand tightly. He had no intention of looking at the child that had just been born. Qingsang, listen to me. The position inside isn't very good right now, but don't be nervous. Let's work hard together. Su Qingsang had no strength left. She looked at Sun Huiya and nodded silently. Sun Huiya's expression was solemn. Giving birth to twins naturally was a relatively difficult thing. It required both children to be in a normal position with their heads down. But now that one child was out, the other child's arm was exposed first. She and Shen Lingyun looked at each other and saw the solemn look in each other's eyes. Su Qingsang really didn't have any strength left. The pain in her stomach was even worse than before. It was as if a knife was constantly stabbing her abdomen, and the pain even made large drops of sweat fall from her forehead. Sun Huiya placed her hand on her abdomen, trying to artificially adjust the position of the fetus. Su Qingsang was in so much pain that her body twitched. Hua Jinyao felt that he was about to faint. He couldn't care about the child at all. All his attention was on Su Qingsang. Qingsang? Qingsang, how are you? Are you okay? Su Qingsang couldn't respond to him. She was in so much pain that she didn't have any strength at all. Director Sunday. Child, can you turn around? He gritted his teeth and asked these 2 questions. Then he met Sun Huiya's solemn face. I'm trying to help you adjust the position of the fetus. Don't be nervous. You're also a doctor. You know that this is normal. Su Qingsang had checked the information before. If some twins had a natural birth, it would take a long time before they could be born. In the past, almost none of the twins that she had delivered had a natural birth. They were all delivered by cesarean section. Since she had planned to have a natural birth, it wouldn't be as easy as a cesarean section. She closed her eyes to rest. She was extremely sleepy, in pain and tired. She almost couldn't hold on any longer. When she was a doctor, she knew that pregnancy and childbirth were very difficult. But she didn't expect it to be so difficult. Qingsang, wake up. Don't sleep. She heard Sun Huiya's voice in a daze. Not only him, but Hua Jinyao's voice was also heard. She wanted to open her eyes, but it was very difficult. She couldn't open her eyes at all. Her body hurt so much that she didn't even have the strength to open her eyes. Qingsang, wake up. The child is coming out. You have to cooperate with me. Qingsang? Ching-seng. She heard people calling her, but she couldn't open her eyes. She was so tired, as if she had lost all her strength. At this moment, Su Ching-seng was no longer the calm and rational doctor. She knew that there was another one in her stomach, but she was too tired and had no strength. Ching-seng? Ching-seng. Hua Jinyao looked at the pale and powerless Su Ching-seng. He realized that he couldn't wake her up no matter how hard he tried. He was terrified and looked at Sun Huiya. What should we do? Dr. Sun? Ching-seng can't wake up now. Why don't we perform a C-section on her? We can't do it now. Sun Huiya's expression was more serious than before. The child's head has already fallen down and is stuck at the entrance of the uterus. At this time, we can only wake her up and let her give birth to the child by herself. Ching-seng, did you hear that? Ching-seng, wake up quickly. Hua Jinyao had never been as panicked as he was at this moment in his life. He was panicking and at a loss. He didn't know what to do. He held Su Ching-seng's hand tightly and kept kissing her sweaty cheek. Ching-seng, wake up. We still have a baby. Don't sleep. Try harder. Don't sleep, okay? Su Ching-seng couldn't hear it. Or perhaps she could. But she couldn't wake up. She just felt tired. She felt very tired, very tired. She didn't have any strength, let alone giving birth. Ching-seng? Ching-seng. Sun Huiya's expression was rather ugly. She reached out to pinch Su Ching-seng's philtrum. Ching-seng, wake up. Try harder. Wake up. Just once. Wake up. Su Ching-seng felt noisy and tired. Some things didn't matter to her. But when it really happened to her, it was often a doctor who didn't treat himself. In fact, her previous performance was already quite good, but she was pregnant with twins. Ching-seng? Hua Jinyao called her a few times, but he couldn't wake Su Ching-seng up. His heart became more and more flustered. He held her hand, bent down, and placed her hand on his face. He leaned down and looked at Su Ching-seng, who had her eyes tightly closed and was exhausted. Ching-seng, I beg you wake up. Listen to me. There's something I've never told you. Don't you want to know what it is? Su Ching-seng heard it, but she was really too tired and in too much pain. She didn't have the strength. Ching-seng. Hua Jinyao kissed her cheek a little hard. He wasn't even afraid of hurting her. He wanted her to wake up. Ching-seng. I love you. He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the tip of her nose and her lips. Looking at Su Ching-seng, who didn't react, Hua Jinyao felt his eyes start to sting and swell. Ching-seng, did you hear that? I love you. I really, really love you. He didn't see Su Ching-seng's brows move slightly. He just pressed his face against her cheek. Do you still remember the first time we met? It was also in the hospital. You stood in the hospital corridor and said that the wedding was cancelled in such an imposing manner. At that time, I thought that this woman was really decisive and strong. You proposed to me, and you asked me if I wanted to marry you? You didn't see the look in your eyes at that time. There was a hint of nervousness in her anticipation. She was afraid of being rejected, afraid of losing face, especially in front of such a scumbag. Hua Jinyao looked at her stubborn, but unable to hide the trace of vulnerability in her eyes, and his heart skipped a beat. He generously agreed to her request. He agreed to marry her. At that time he thought, so what? Wasn't it just marriage? Anyway, Grandpa had wanted him to get married for a long time. This woman, with such a personality, Grandpa should like her, right? Married life was much better than he had imagined. Su Ching-seng's personality looked a little cold on the surface, but her heart was as warm as fire. Her coldness was protective, and she only used it on people she was not familiar with. Her background, her personality, and everything about her. After slowly understanding her, Hua Jinyao found that there was a shadow of Su Ching-seng in his heart and eyes. Because of the accident in his childhood, there seemed to be nothing wrong with him on the surface, but only he knew that there was a wall in his heart. Not just anyone could enter the heart of an impenetrable fortress. However, Su Ching-seng was able to push down his wall bit by bit, and stubbornly moved in. Ching-seng, I love you. Do you hear that? Wake up quickly. Okay. He had never tried to cry for anyone other than his family in his life. The few times he was touched were all for Su Ching-seng. Now Hua Jinyao's eyes were full of tears. He enjoyed his married life with Su Ching-seng. He liked to see her every day after work. He liked the warmth in the house because of her existence. He liked to have her by his side, even if she didn't do anything. Without Su Qingsang, he couldn't imagine how he would live such a long life in the future. Qingsang, I'm begging you. Wake up. I promise you that as long as you wake up, I'll listen to you in the future. Qingsang. He felt his face itch and instinctively stepped back. He looked at Su Qingsang's face. She was still weak and pale, but her eyes were open. You are so noisy. After saying these 3 words, she looked at Sun Huiya. Director Sun. The child is coming out. You have to work harder. Sun Huiya's face was full of joy when she saw that she was awake. Although the situation just now wasn't dangerous for adults, it was easy for children to suffocate if they were stuck inside for too long. Come Qingsang, listen to me and cooperate with me. When I tell you to work hard, you start working hard. Just once, let's try to succeed once and give birth to the child. Su Qingsang nodded weakly. 1, 2, 3, use more strength. Su Qingsang really didn't have any strength left. Amidst the pain and exhaustion, she saw Hua Jinyao's face that was as pale as a sheet of paper. She suddenly raised her hand and gently stroked his hand. Hua Jinyao grabbed her hand and pressed it tightly against his face. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang squeezed out those words with all her strength. I love you too. After saying this, she used all her strength. This time, the feeling of relaxation really came. Something left her body. She heard Sun Huiya's voice. I've given birth. This is a daughter. Qingsang, you've given birth to a pair of twins. Su Qingsang curled her lips. She wanted to smile, but she couldn't smile now. All her perseverance had been used up in that instant. Su Qingsang, who had relaxed, fainted completely. Before she fainted, she only heard Hua Jinyao's extremely sharp and panicked cry. Qingsang! Qingsang! The people who came to visit her in the ward came and left and came again. There were already several groups of people coming and going. However, Su Qingsang, who had fallen asleep, didn't wake up. Hua Jinyao had been by Su Qingsang's side the whole time. He didn't have the time to care about others, let alone the child. Sun Huiya had clearly told him that Su Qingsang was fine. She had only fallen asleep because she had lost too much blood and exhausted her energy after giving birth to 2 children in a row. However, he couldn't be at ease until he saw Su Qingsang wake up. He held her hand and didn't let go no matter how the people who came to visit Su Qingsang came and went. It had been a day since Su Qingsang gave birth. Today was already the 3rd day of the new year. However, Su Qingsang still hadn't woken up. Hua Jinyao couldn't sit still anymore. He resisted the urge to ring the bell and told himself that he had to believe in Director Sun and believe that Su Qingsang was fine. It had been snowing for the past 2 days. In the evening, the snow outside finally stopped. Hua Jinyao looked out of the window and then at Su Qingsang. He pressed her hand against his face again. Qingsang? Look, the snow has stopped. Didn't you say that you like to make snowmen? Wake up quickly. When you wake up, I'll make one for you to see. Qingsang, you've given birth to a pair of twins. The doctors in your hospital all say that you're amazing. Don't you want to get up and see the children? To Hua Jinyao's disappointment, no matter what he said this time, Su Qingsang didn't wake up. His heart began to grow anxious. When Sun Huiya entered the ward to see Su Qingsang again, he couldn't help it. Chapter 645. You know, when Qingsang gave birth, she wasn't in a good state, and she lost so much blood. This will make your body weak, and you need to rest. Just because she needs to rest doesn't mean that she's unconscious, right? Hua Jinyao was really anxious. Didn't you say that she's fine? Since there's no problem, why isn't he waking up? I only said it's not a big problem. I didn't say she can wake up immediately. Then how will she wake up? Sun Huiya looked at Su Qingsang. After sleeping for a night, her complexion was a little better than yesterday, but it was still as pale as a sheet. The birth of the twins had greatly damaged Su Qingsang's vitality, so it was normal for her to be like this. However, looking at Hua Jinyao's anxious and worried expression, Sun Huiya didn't know what to say. Don't be too nervous. Maybe he'll wake up tomorrow. Tomorrow? You still have to wait until tomorrow? How could Hu Jingyao wait? He couldn't wait an hour, not even a minute. Li Qianxue looked at Hu Jingyao. She was shocked by Hu Jingyao's performance in the past 2 days. However, looking at Hu Jingyao's unshaven face and wrinkled clothes, she couldn't help but step forward and ask. Jingyao, since the doctor said that Qingsing will wake up tomorrow, you can just wait for another day. You see, you can't help much even if you stay here. Why don't you go back and tidy yourself up first? Hu Jingyao stood there without moving. He didn't want to leave Su Qingsang's side for a minute. Lu Tongjia was there as well, followed by Ms. Zhou. Ms. Zhou was carrying a lunch box and a bag. Jingyao, my in-laws have a point. How can you look like this? Go tidy yourself up. As she spoke, Aunt Zhou stepped forward and handed the bag to Hu Jingyao. I've packed a few sets of clothes for you. You can go into the bathroom to take a shower and change your clothes. Even if you don't think about yourself, you should think about the child, right? How are you going to meet the child later, when you're in such a mess? Hu Jingyao looked at Lu Tongjia, then at Li Qianxue, and finally at Su Qingsang, who was still asleep. He gave up and went into the bathroom to change. Li Qianxue and Lu Tongjia looked at each other. Both of them were worried. By right, she had already given birth and rested. Why hasn't he woken up after a day? Hu Jingyao took a shower and soon came out. After changing his clothes, he looked more energetic. As soon as he came out, he sat in front of Su Qingsang's bed, his eyes full of worry. Li Qianxue and Lu Tongjia were the only 2 elders in the ward. Old Master Li, Hu Jingyao, and the others had accompanied him for the whole day and most of the night. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore and went back to rest. Sun Huiya looked at Hu Jingyao, sighed and left. At night, the elders all went to sleep. However, Hu Jingyao refused to go to bed. He also refused to let the caregivers, or the aunties, take care of Su Qingsang. He had not taken a look at the child since it was born, and he did not want to. He just stayed with Su Qingsang, and refused to leave no matter what. Qingsang, don't you want to wake up and see our child? You see, you haven't seen them yet. Although I haven't seen it either. Su Qingsang fainted not long after she was born. When the second child was finally born, Su Qingsang was completely exhausted. She couldn't wake up. So don't expect me to tell you what the 2 children look like. I haven't seen them either. Do you want to wake up soon? And then come see them with me? Qingsang, you were the one who asked me to be a father. I hope that I can experience all the first times in my life with you. His eyes were a little red. He didn't want to sleep. He gently placed his face beside Su Qingsang's arm. He just looked at her sleeping face. Honey, I'll wait for you. When Su Qingsang opened her eyes, she felt that her body was limp and she had no strength at all. She seemed to have had a long sleep. When she woke up, her spirit needed to recover bit by bit. She saw sunlight shining in the ward, and there was snow on the windowsill. The sunlight refracted on the snowflakes, shining with crystal clear light. It was exceptionally beautiful. Following the light, she saw the top of his black hair. Hu Jingyao was sleeping by her bed. His face was covered with stubble. There was also a circle of darkness under his eyes. She remembered hearing a lot of words when she was asleep. When she woke up, she didn't remember it clearly. She only remembered that Hu Jingyao said that he loved her. She raised her hand and gently stroked the top of his hair, then moved it to his face. As soon as her hand touched Hu Jinyao's face, he grabbed it. He raised his head and looked at her with wide eyes. There was obvious surprise in his eyes. You're awake? Qingsang, you're awake? Su Qingsang wanted to speak, but she couldn't. Her throat was so dry. Hu Jinyao poured her a glass of warm water, and watched her drink it. Su Qingsang felt much better. Only then did she see Hu Jinyao's appearance clearly. He looked even worse than when he was asleep. So ugly, Su Qingsang complained. Su Qingsang complained. She looked at his red, dark circles and stubble on his face. You're not handsome anymore. You're awake. You're awake. Hu Jinyao didn't have time to pay attention to her teasing. He could only express his feelings by kissing her palm continuously. You're awake, Qingsang, you're awake. It's really great. You're awake. Where's the child? Su Qingsang felt her stomach was empty. Only then did she remember that she had given birth to the child yesterday. How's the child? I don't know. You don't know? You fainted after giving birth to the child. I didn't have time to take care of the child. Hua Jinyao couldn't hide his worry. Su Qingseng stared at him with her eyes wide open. Why are you like this? Then, I've been sleeping for so long. You should at least take a look, right? No. Hua Jinyao was very willful. He held Su Qingseng's hand tightly, and the expression on his face was rare. If you hadn't woken up, I would have sent them away. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingseng was angry. She glared at Hua Jinyao for a long time and finally said helplessly, Forget it. Bring the child to me now. It seems to be in the incubator. Hua Jinyao wasn't sure. In fact, he hadn't cared about the child since it was born. He had focused all his attention on Su Qingseng. Is the child okay? Why is it in the incubator? Su Qingseng's face was full of worry. At this moment a voice sounded. Don't listen to his nonsense. The child is fine. The eldest went back to the nursery for observation yesterday, and the second is still in the incubator. Don't worry, everything is normal. I only let it stay in the incubator to ensure that it's safe. Mom! Su Qingseng saw Li Qianxue coming. She was carrying a big bag in her hand. Seeing that Su Qingseng had woken up, Li Qianxue heaved a sigh of relief. To be honest, if Su Qingseng continued to sleep, she wouldn't be able to take it. I didn't expect you to wake up so early. It just so happens that there's breakfast here, and the soup I asked the auntie to make. Qingseng, come and drink the soup when you wake up. Director Sun said that you've injured your vitality. Next, you have to listen to me and take good nourishment. You have to recover your body. Mom, it's not like what you said. This nourishment isn't random. I don't care. Drink this bowl of chicken soup first. Okay, I'll drink it. Su Qingseng wouldn't argue with Li Qianxue over such a small matter. She thought that she had only slept for 1 day, but she didn't know that she had slept for 2 days. She got up and went to the bathroom to wash up. When she came out, she was told that she had actually slept for 2 days. She was stunned herself. That's impossible, right? I've always thought that I was in good health. You're still talking about it. You gave birth on the 2nd day of the Chinese New Year, and slept until the 4th day of the Chinese New Year. That's you. Li Qianxue's words were filled with heartache. Su Qingseng stuck out her tongue, and sat down on the bed again. She cooperated and finished the chicken soup. She was really hungry. After a bowl of soup, she felt that her energy had recovered a lot. I want to see the children. I'll take you there. Hua Jinyao had just gone to find a wheelchair. He knew that Su Qingseng would definitely want to see the children when she woke up. There were 2 children, one in the nursery, and the other in the incubator. Seeing that Su Qingseng had woken up, Sun Huiya, who had specially come to see her, told her about the situation. The older one is fine. The younger one was stuck in the uterus for a long time when he was born. His breathing was a little weak when he was born, but his vital signs are normal. There's no problem, don't worry. Okay. Thank you, Director Sunday. DeBeo had stayed in the nursery for 2 days. His facial features had grown a little more than when he was born. His little face was red and he looked very healthy. DeBeo was 8 kilograms when he was born. Xiaobao was 5 kilograms. Xiaobao was lighter. But they're all very healthy. Qingseng, you're amazing. Su Qingseng looked at the little baby and felt her heart soften. Director Sun, can I carry him back to the ward? I want to breastfeed him. Of course you can. You can try to let him drink milk, but you have to. I reckon that there won't be enough milk. Su Qingseng smiled. Whether it was enough or not, she didn't want to rely on others to breastfeed the child. She wanted to do it herself. After looking at DeBeo, she went to look at Xiaobao. The little girl said that her skin wasn't red like that of ordinary children. Instead, it was white and tender. She was small and looked very cute. When Su Qingseng saw her daughter, she felt as if her heart was about to melt. It was completely different from seeing her son. Jinyao, that's our daughter. Yes. Hua Jinyao also saw her. It was his first time seeing his daughter. Her small face and tightly closed eyes. She slept there and didn't need to do anything, but Hua Jinyao could feel that his life was complete. He bent down and hugged Su Qingseng tightly. Wife, thank you. Only then did he truly feel that he had become a father. A son, a daughter, and Su Qingseng. They would be his entire world now and in the future. Thank you. You're welcome. Su Qingseng smiled. She glanced at Sun Huya. Does she need to be observed for a long time? No need. She can leave the incubator tomorrow. Sun Huya smiled. Your daughter is like you. She's also very strong. Su Qingseng smiled so much that her eyes narrowed. Her body hadn't fully recovered yet, so Sun Huya asked her to go back and rest first. As for contact with the child, there was no rush. There would always be a chance. Li Qianxue had already seen her grandson yesterday, but now that she saw him again, she still couldn't help but want to hug him. He looks so good. He looks like Hua Jingyao when he was young. Lu Tongjia looked at the child from the side. Now that he had grown a little, his facial features were even more obvious. I think his eyebrows and eyes look a little like Qingsong's. He's so young, and you can tell who he looks like. Su Yusen, who had rushed over, glanced at the little baby and clicked his tongue. Why do I feel like no one looks like him? How can you say that? Li Qianxue couldn't help but pat her son on the head. What nonsense are you talking about? It's true. Only you guys can tell who he looks like. I can tell. I think he looks like me. Su Yusen didn't stand on ceremony at all. Haven't you heard of him? Nephews look like uncles. Pfft. Su Qingseng couldn't help but laugh. When she laughed, she felt a little pain in her abdomen. She just couldn't help it. You look like Qingseng. Who do you think the child looks like? So, Su Yusen said rather shamelessly, he has to look like me. Lu Tongjia couldn't stop laughing. She was very amused by Su Yusen. Su Qingseng looked at the scene in front of her and felt that it was really good. What's the child's name? Li Qianxue looked at Lu Tongjia. If the name isn't decided so quickly, let's call him by his nickname first. Debao's nickname is Xiang Xiang, and Xiaobao's nickname is Nian Nian. Xiang Xiang? Okay. Lu Tongjia hugged him and thought about it. Looking at the tender little face, her eyes suddenly turned red. Mom. Hua Jingyao stood next to her and put his hand on Lu Tongjia's shoulder. He didn't say anything, but the name had already said everything. It's okay. I'm happy. Lu Tongjia looked at the children in her arms. The pain she had felt in the past had lessened a lot because of the birth of these two children. There were still regrets, but she would learn to let them go. People always had to look forward. A day later, Su Qingseng had mostly recovered. Because it was a natural birth, she was discharged from the hospital after observation. Following her out of the hospital were two adorable, fair, and delicate babies. When they returned home, old Master Hua, who had wanted to celebrate, could only suppress his excitement under Su Qingsong's stop. The children were still young. It was indeed not good for there to be too many people coming and going. They could only wait until the full moon. But even if they couldn't celebrate, old Master Hua's joy was obvious. The relatives of the Hua family also knew. Other than those who had gone to the hospital before, many people came to see the twins. Of course, not everyone could see them. Su Qingseng was upstairs with the children. They weren't very familiar with her. They only knew that Su Qingseng had given birth to a pair of twins, but they couldn't see the two children. If Su Qingseng was alone, she wouldn't be able to take care of the two babies. Even with Li Qianxue and Lu Tongjia, it was the same. What would they do? The Hua family hired 2 nannies and 2 aunties to take care of the 2 babies. Li Qianxue took advantage of the New Year's holiday to stay. Every day, she looked at her grandchildren and felt her heart soften. After the 7th day, Su Yusen and Old Master Li returned to Lin City first. Li Qianxue continued to stay, wanting to spend a few more days with her daughter. Hua Jingyao returned to work. Although he wanted to spend more time with Su Qingseng and her children, there were still things in the company that he needed to deal with. However, he didn't go out to socialize at all. If there was anything, he would leave it to Yang Wenchang and Zhang Yang. If he really needed to make a decision, he would go to the company. He even threw some of the work to Hua Mingguang. And he called his behavior, accompanying the children during the confinement period. Hua Jingyao learned how to be a stay-at-home father. There were nannies and aunties at home, but most of the time, he preferred to do it himself. He still remembered how he felt the first time he hugged Xiang Nian. He also remembered how he felt the first time he hugged Nian Nian. When the two children were in his hands, he felt as if he had hugged the world. The honor of changing diapers for the first time fell on Xiang Nian. Perhaps it was because as the older brother, his body was better than his sister's. Xiang Nian ate more. In just a few days, he had already distanced himself from Nian Nian. His face was red, and he looked energetic. He cried loudly. Sometimes, when he cried, it felt as if the entire floor could hear him. When he cried for the first time, Hua Jinyao was still a little confused. He understood that the child had only peed on his body, so he personally changed the child's diaper. He was a little clumsy, but he was especially careful. Su Qingseng looked at Hua Jinyao and suddenly had a feeling. She thought that Hua Jinyao would definitely be a very good father in the future. He would give all his love to these two children. Although he thought about it, what made his heart ache even more was Nian Nian. Contrary to what he thought, Nian Nian, who was born dozens of minutes later, was very quiet. She rarely cried. Even if she wanted to drink milk or change her diaper, she would only moan a few times. When she moaned, her face was red, as if she was holding her breath. It looked very heartbreaking. Because of this, Hua Jinyao's heart ached even more for Nian Nian. He wished he could hold his daughter in his arms all the time. Every day, other than taking care of Su Qingseng, he spent the most time with the two children. When Xiang Nian was washing the third day with Nian Nian, the Hua family came. Afraid that he would startle the two children, Hua Jinyao only carried the twins for everyone to see, then carried them back to their room. He was very protective now, so he was even easier to wake up than Su Qingseng. The baby's room was arranged next to their room, and there was also a nanny and auntie to take care of the children. However, every time the child moaned, Hua Jinyao would wake up immediately. He had to work during the day and take care of the children at night. He was also responsible for accompanying Su Qingseng and slowly recovering with her. A few days later, Su Qingseng had recovered a lot, and she looked a little more plump. However, Hua Jinyao had lost weight. Seeing this, Li Qianxue was a little more satisfied with this son-in-law. There was no harm without comparison. Looking at what Hua Jinyao had done and thinking about what Su Qinghui had done, she could tell that Hua Jinyao truly loved Su Qingseng and treated her and her son well. She had nothing to worry about. She didn't tell Su Qinghui about the baby. If he wanted to know, he would naturally find out. Li Qianxue didn't think it was necessary to inform him. She would rather not see Su Qinghui. She didn't mention Su Qinghui, and neither did Su Qingseng. The mother and daughter often stayed together during the day. Li Qianxue was afraid that Su Qingseng would be bored during her confinement, so she always talked to her and took care of her. Just like Hua Jinyao took care of the two children, Li Qianxue would rather take care of Su Qingseng herself. She often blamed herself for not doing enough in the past, and wished that she could treat Su Qingseng better. After more than 10 days, the relationship between the two had improved a lot. Lu Tongjia had also taken this opportunity to improve her relationship with Hua Jinyao. There were 2 more children in the family. There were many topics that the elders could talk about. For example, today Nian Nian drank more milk. Thinking about it, she cried a few more times. Because of the existence of the 2 children, the Hua family suddenly had countless more vitality. That day, Hua Jinyao returned home with a bag. During this period of time, there were enough gifts. Whether it was Li Qianxue or Lu Tongjia, no one was surprised. When the things were carried upstairs, no one opened them. It wasn't until night time that everyone else had gone back to their rooms to sleep. The child was also carried to the baby's room to rest. Hua Jinyao carried the bag and sat down by the bed. What? So mysterious? Hua Jinyao said that Su Qingseng had a hard time giving birth, and he would bring her some surprises from time to time. However, this was the first time he had been so mysterious. Hua Jinyao didn't say anything. He just took out the things inside. There were 2 sweaters and 2 onesies. There were also 2 small vests, both made of wool. They weren't thick, and were suitable for babies to wear. It could be seen that they were made of high-quality wool. The fine stitches were especially soft. It was very comfortable to touch. There was no need for Hua Jinyao to explain in detail. Su Qingseng knew who prepared this. Auntie is here. She came to look for you? Strictly speaking, she didn't come to look for me. She came to look for Yang Wenchang. Tianyu Group couldn't enter without an appointment. Xiang Kaiping didn't intend to disturb Hu Jinniao and let people know that she had a relationship with Hu Jinniao. She went to Tianyu Group, found Yang Wenchang, and gave him this. Yang Wenchang had helped Hu Jinniao deal with many things in the past, so he naturally knew Xiang Kaiping. She said that she speculated that the two children should be about to be born during this period of time. It wasn't convenient for her to visit, but she had to prepare the gifts first. When Yang Wenchang told her that the children had been born, she was very happy. She was even happier when she heard that they had given birth to a pair of twins. She handed the gifts to Yang Wenchang and asked him to pass them to Hu Jinniao. That's great. That's great. Qingseng is a lucky man. Please tell Jinniao not to tell Qingseng that it was me who prepared it. She said that, but Hu Jinniao couldn't not tell her. Moreover, with Su Qingseng's intelligence, it was impossible for her not to guess. Su Qingseng stroked the two sweaters, picked them up, and gently smelled them. She thought of something and suddenly smiled. Put them away. Ah, when my mother returns to Lin City, I'll take them out for the children to wear. Besides, it's too big now. I can't wear it. Okay. Hu Jinniao nodded and got up to pick up the sweaters inside. And this. A pair of longevity locks. In Lin City there was such a custom. If a grandmother became a grandmother, she had to prepare a longevity lock for her children. Li Qianxue had already bought one before, and it was more exquisite than this. However, this one was also Xiang Kaiping's intention. Su Qingseng's eyes were a little sore. She blinked her eyes, suppressed her emotions, and looked at Hu Jinniao. Put them away. When they grow up, leave them to the children. The twins were children of the Hu family, so they naturally didn't lack such things. But this was a kind intention. Chapter 646. Jinniao. Yes. I suddenly feel so happy. Yes. Hu Jinniao hugged her and smelled the faint milky fragrance on her body. Ever since she gave birth, her body was full of motherly radiance. I feel very happy too. Su Qingseng pressed her face against Hu Jinniao's chest. A long time ago, she had always thought that she was a pitiful little girl, an illegitimate daughter. No one doted on or loved her. Therefore, she could only love herself. Now, she suddenly felt that maybe she had been wronged in the past 20 years. So she was twice as happy in the future. Right. Su Qingseng thought of what she could do for Xiang Kaiping. If Su Peijian can change after she gets out, let's not care about her anymore. She knew what Xiang Kaiping cared about the most, and the only thing she could give her was not to destroy what she cared about the most. Of course, the premise was that Su Peijian lived up to her expectations and didn't mess around anymore. I promise you, Hu Jinniao could guarantee this. As long as Su Peijian didn't court disaster, he believed that she could continue her life after she got out. Moreover, with Su Peijian's ability, she could live a good life. That was if she was willing. Speaking of which, she hadn't paid attention to Su Peijian for a long time. How is she recently? Not bad. Hu Jinniao really asked Yang Wenchang to ask about her today, because of Xiang Kaiping. She should be able to get a reduction in her sentence. It's been reduced by half a year now. Really? That was great. It meant that Su Peijian was really repentant now. Yes. I heard that she's teaching people in prison. A month before the new year, the prison organized a performance party. She was the leader. I heard that the response to several performances was good. The higher-ups are very satisfied with the current performance of their prison. It can be said that she made a contribution and got a reduction of half a year. If she is willing to continue like this, I think she can get out in less than 3 years. Regardless of whether her purpose was to reduce her sentence or not, with her pride, it was already progress that she was willing to do these things. That's great. Su Qingseng thought of Xiang Kaiping. This way, Auntie can live a better life. Hu Jinniao didn't comment. Even if Su Peijian came out and stopped doing bad things, it was still unknown whether she could accept Xiang Kaiping. Alright, you're still in confinement. You don't have to worry about other people's business. Sleep. I'm just saying it casually. I'm not tired now. I've let you guys do all the work. I have nothing to do at all. At home, there were 2 aunties and 2 nannies who specialized in taking care of the children. Apart from breastfeeding, most of the time, she could not interfere. As for carrying a child, it was even more difficult. If it weren't for the fact that the 2 children were basically sleeping a lot now, the elders at home would be fighting to hug them. Old Master Huo was the happiest one. Recently, he was in high spirits because of happy events. He was grinning from ear to ear. It wasn't that there weren't people of his age who had lived to his age, but there weren't many with 4 generations living under the same roof. There were 4 generations living under the same roof, but there was no family that had twins, and they were a boy and a girl. How could old Master Huo not be proud? He felt as if the wind was blowing when he walked. Not only was old Master Huo happy, but Huo Yangyuan and Huo Yangxiu also liked to visit the children when they were free. After a few days, the facial features of the 2 little fellows had also slowly grown. With Huo Jinniao and Su Qingsang's good looks, the 2 babies looked like they were carved from jade, and looked extremely cute. They looked like Huo Jinniao, but Su Qingsang's outline could be seen. Nian Nian looked more like Su Qingsang. However, Huo Jinniao's shadow could still be seen in her eyes. Speaking of which, the 2 little guys looked very similar. Looking at the 2 little babies every day, Su Qingsang felt satisfied with everything. The pain during childbirth, and the lingering fear of almost falling asleep and not waking up became insignificant at this moment. After the first month, it would be the little baby's full moon. It was still very cold in Rong City, and Su Qingsang had just finished her confinement. She didn't want to celebrate too much, so she told old Master Huo that she just wanted to treat her family to a meal to celebrate. How could old Master Huo be willing? Su Qingsang tried to persuade him again and again, but she only said that the 2 children were still young. There was no need to be too ostentatious. Huo Jinniao knew what Su Qingsang meant. The children were still young, and it was cold outside. If they wanted to hold a big party, they would have to bring the 2 children out to meet people. Su Qingsang felt sorry for the children and was unwilling. With Huo Jinniao's help to persuade her, and Lu Tongjia also felt that they were still young. Old Master Huo could only take a step back. It was fine if they didn't have a banquet for the small full moon, but they had to hold a big one for the big full moon. Huo Jinniao and Su Qingsang didn't have a wedding in Rong City. Old Master Huo also wanted to take this opportunity to give Su Qingsang. This time, Su Qingsang and Huo Jinniao couldn't go against Old Master Huo's wishes anymore. They could only agree. 3 months later, the weather in Rong City would also be warm. It would be appropriate to take the children out. Li Qianxue stayed in Rong City for more than half a month. She still had things to do, so she returned to Lin City after the Lantern Festival. Before she left, she was especially reluctant to part with Nian Nian. After returning to Lin City, she would talk to Su Qingsang at least 3 times a day. Every day before going to bed, she would look at her grandchildren before going to bed. As Nian Nian grew up, her facial features combined the advantages of Huo Jinniao and Su Qingsang. Unexpectedly, the more they looked, the more similar they became. Although they looked alike, their personalities were completely different. As Nian Nian grew up, his voice became louder and louder. He often roared when he was unhappy, and his cries could even be heard downstairs. Nian Nian was different. She rarely cried. Sometimes, when she saw Nian Nian crying, she would blink at him, as if she didn't quite understand what he was crying about. At this time, something very interesting would happen. When Nian Nian didn't cry and only stared at him, he wouldn't cry anymore. Su Qingsang's greatest pleasure now was to observe the 2 children. She didn't know that children were really different every day after becoming a mother. She thought that Nian Nian's hair grew faster, but it was always darker. But what about Nian Nian? Her hair was thin. When she was born, it was a little yellow, but it slowly became darker. If she drank milk, Nian Nian would often drink all of Su Qingsang's milk. When Nian Nian wanted to drink it, it was gone. At this time, she would feel especially wronged, but she wouldn't cry. She would just look at him like that. Su Qingsang's heart melted. Next time, she would feed Nian Nian first. But after thinking about it, she didn't want to. When he made a fuss, it would be very loud. Sometimes, Su Qingseng would wonder who this child looked like. Why was he so good at making a fuss? She heard from Lu Tongjia that Hu Jiniao was quite sensible when he was young. He was obedient and easy to take care of. He didn't even need to wake up at night. How did he turn into a little devil in Xiang? Su Qingseng had no choice but to gulp down the milk soup. She was afraid that 2 babies wouldn't be enough. Even so, Nian Nian still drank milk powder. When the little guy held the milk bottle in his mouth, he looked extremely pitiful. At first, he refused to drink the milk from the bottle, no matter what. Later, he was so hungry that he barely drank 2 mouthfuls. After trying a few more times, he knew that he wouldn't be able to drink his mother's milk. In the end, he finally accepted the fact that he could only get the milk bottle. His resistance was a little less. Every time this happened, Su Qingseng felt both amused and helpless. There was nothing she could do. Nian Nian's physique was a little weaker than Nian Nian's. She really couldn't blame him for being biased. Even Hu Jiniao had the same thought. Boys have to be raised a little rougher. Isn't it just that he doesn't have milk to drink? He has such a bad temper. When he grows up, see how I'll deal with him. Although that was what he said, every time the child cried, he couldn't wait to immediately pick him up and coax him. Su Qingseng couldn't be bothered to expose his tough words and soft heart. Anyway, the child was his. When the time came, he would really deal with him ruthlessly. Time slowly passed by more than 2 months. Soon, it was the 100th day of the 2 little guys' lives. Because old Master Hu said that they wanted to hold a big party, the Hu family had 100 tables in the largest hotel in Rong City. They invited all the people who were friends with the Hu family, their business partners, and their distant and close relatives. Xiang and Nian Nian, who were already 100 days old, now looked like 2 little dolls in a New Year's painting. They were pink and tender, and especially likable. It wasn't the first time Xiang had gone out. He had gone out for a vaccination and a checkup at the hospital. However, it was the first time he had seen so many people. He wasn't afraid of strangers at all. He just rolled his eyes and looked around. If anyone reached out to hug him, he was willing to let them hug him. He smiled at whoever hugged him. Nian Nian wasn't afraid of strangers, but she didn't seem to like to interact with others. She was only willing to let her family hug her, and didn't want anyone else. Finally, when she saw Hu Jiniao in a suit and tie, she immediately turned her head and kept looking at him. Nian Nian liked Hu Jiniao very much. As long as Hu Jiniao hugged her, she would obediently stay in her father's arms. Seeing that there were so many people, no matter who came, she didn't want to bother with them. She just buried her face in Hu Jiniao's arms. The others were fine, but Hu Jiniao's group of childhood friends had all come. Wan Xianying loved to play, and Tang Mohan was also very lively. The group of people looked at the 2 little babies with envy and jealousy. Xiang was fine. He was willing to be hugged by anyone. Nian Nian couldn't do it. She refused to let anyone hug her. She would change her face the moment someone hugged her. Hu Jiniao couldn't bear to let them hug her either. The rules were that they could only look at her and not hug her. This little girl has such a bad temper. Wan Xianying clicked his tongue, but his eyes were filled with envy. Jiniao, I think your daughter is so cold and aloof. I don't know which kid will be able to catch up to her in the future. Tang Mohan looked at Hu Jiniao's 2 treasures with envy. To be honest, among these childhood friends, Hu Jiniao was the luckiest one. He went to open a branch office somewhere else, and he came back with a wife. It wasn't a big deal to marry a wife. The key was that his wife wasn't an ordinary person. Look at how she gave birth to 2 children in one go. She had both a son and a daughter. What nonsense are you talking about? Hu Jiniao now treated his daughter like a pearl. When he heard Tang Mohan's words, he was unhappy. What kid? I'll destroy whoever dares to have any ideas about my daughter. Nonsense again. Su Qingseng couldn't stand it anymore. Will you be happy if no one wants your daughter when she grows up? How can no one want my daughter? Hu Jiniao retorted. I'm just saying that I won't let them have any ideas about my daughter. Yes. You can raise her at home for the rest of her life. I'll raise her for the rest of her life. It's not like I can't afford to raise her. Su Qingseng facepalmed. She had begun to understand Hua Jinyao's daughter complex over the past few days. Jinyao, don't be so stubborn, Li Junqing teased. Maybe if your daughter doesn't get married a few years later, you'll still rush her. Absolutely not. Hua Jinyao couldn't bear to part with her. I can't bear to hand my daughter over to those brats. Su Qingseng laughed and didn't want to talk to this person. How old was Nian Nian now? Why was he thinking so far ahead? Sure enough, when Li Junqing and the others heard Hua Jinyao's words, their eyes were filled with ridicule. Wan Xianyang stepped forward and patted Hua Jinyao on the shoulder. I regret not getting married earlier. Otherwise I would have had a son. When I grow up, I'll chase after your daughter. Don't be in a hurry. It's not too late for you to have a child now. Cheng Xianyan watched the show and didn't mind the matter getting bigger. Hurry up and work hard. Xianyang isn't the only one who can work hard. I can say that about me too. Tang Mohan joined in the fun. I'll hurry up and get married. When the time comes, we'll get married when we're kids. Get lost. Hua Jinyao didn't continue the conversation. All of you stay away from my daughter. The group of people laughed. It could be seen now. In the future, Hua Jinyao would definitely be a daughter lover. He wouldn't be able to run away from being a protective maniac. The banquet began, and old Master Hua went on stage to speak. He was very happy today. At this age he had everything. He liked to see the family prosper. Today, I'm sure everyone knows why I've invited all of you here. I'm not talented, but I'm indebted to everyone for taking care of me in Rong City all these years. Thank you for coming. He was being polite, but no one really thought that he had anything to take care of the Hua family. Everyone knows that this burden has to be passed down from generation to generation. What is passed down? It's people. Here, I want to thank my granddaughter-in-law first. Thank her for bringing such a cute pair of twins to our Hua family. Thank her for going through so much hardship, so that I can be promoted to be your great-granddaughter. I once said that my grandson, Hua Jinyao, as a man, the most insightful thing in his life is to marry a good wife. At this moment, there was laughter below the stage. Old Master Hua waved his hand and continued. My granddaughter-in-law Su Qingsang is not only a good partner of Hua Jinyao, but also a good daughter-in-law of the Hua family. Now the Hua family has a pair of twins. As an old man, I don't have much to give. I'll give my granddaughter-in-law 2% of the shares of the Tianyu Group under my name. How much was the market value of the Tianyu Group? 2% of the shares was quite shocking. With these shares, Su Qingsang could enter the board of directors in the future. All the guests present immediately looked at Su Qingsang, who was holding the child. She didn't expect such a thing to happen, so she couldn't help but glance at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao's reaction was to pinch her palm, indicating for her to calm down. No, why would I want the shares? Su Qingsang said in a low voice. Hua Jinyao smiled at her. Grandpa gave it to you, so just take it. Don't worry. If you feel that it's too hot, you can give it to the two children in the future. While they were talking, old Master Hua had already told them about the gifts for the twins. There were 2 properties under his name, plus 2 funds worth more than 10 million yuan. Jinyao, isn't Grandpa giving too much? They were still 2 children. They didn't know anything, and didn't know anything. So what if he gave it away? Don't think too much about it. Since these things are from Grandpa, just take them. But Su Qingsang wasn't timid. She looked around. Almost all the relatives of the Hua family were here today. To be honest, she really wasn't used to old Master Hua being so high profile. It wasn't just old Master Hua. Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia both expressed their feelings after the birth of their children. The 2 little guys were still so young, but their assets were already quite astonishing. Most importantly, old Master Hua gave these things to Xiang Xiang and Nian Nian. Hua Jinyao didn't only have one brother. He was the only one. But what about Hua Mingliang and Hua Mingmei? There were other people there. Although they weren't married yet, they would get married sooner or later, and they would have children sooner or later. Old Master Hua was so high profile that other people would probably be jealous if they saw it. Silly. Hua Jinyao leaned over. You're worth it, and so are the children. Su Qingsang knew that she couldn't change old Master Hua's mind. She looked at Hua Mingguang's family at the other table. Hua Yifan was still in prison, and Hua Yang and Hua Manzi were sitting with their parents. Of course, they couldn't cause any trouble on such an occasion. However, their expressions couldn't be considered happy. Ignore them. As if he knew what she was thinking, Hua Jinyao held her hand tightly. Don't worry. Believe me, I have the ability to protect you. And I also have the ability to protect the two little babies. Okay. Su Qingseng wasn't too worried. She just felt that it wasn't good to be so high profile. However, since the truth was already like this, she could only accept it. Actually, you really don't have to be too nervous. Every child of the Hua family will be born with a corresponding property under their name. In the future, if Hua Yifan and the others have another child, they will definitely have the same. Really? Of course it's true. Hua Jinyao nodded. However, it was impossible for it to be as grand as Xiang Xiang and Nian Nian, even if old Master Hua would be said to be biased. However, there were some things and people that he really favored Hua Jinyao more. This was something that others couldn't be jealous of. The full moon banquet was very lively. Xiang Xiang refused to sleep until he was too tired. He fell asleep in the auntie's arms. It didn't take long for Nian Nian to fall into a deep sleep. When she got home, the two little ones woke up together. When they woke up, they started to make a fuss, wanting their mother. Su Qingseng had been tired all day, but she had no choice but to cheer up and feed the two little ones. It wasn't easy for her to coax the two little ones to sleep again. She could finally rest. However, before Su Qingseng could walk to the door and return to her room, Nian Nian cried again. It was different from the previous soft moans. Nian Nian cried a little loudly this time. Su Qingseng went forward to take a look, and found that her daughter didn't look too good either. Nian Nian? Chapter 647. In the past few months, although Nian Nian didn't eat as much as she thought, her body had always been healthy. Su Qingseng told herself not to be anxious. It might just be the child's normal crying. Nian Nian had always been obedient and never made people worry. Now, she was crying so hard that her face was red. The auntie and the nanny were both there. They went forward to take a look. Could she be feeling unwell? Or did she get a stomachache? That's impossible. It's all milk. What can she get sick from eating? Could it be that he's shocked? Why are there so many people today? It's possible. In our hometown, we usually don't carry children out easily because we're afraid of being shocked. Hearing the auntie's words, Su Qingseng became more and more anxious. Stop talking. Let me check first. She gave Nian Nian a basic checkup. She was a doctor, so she had all the medicine boxes at home. She took Nian Nian's temperature and found that she was fine. She then checked her respiratory tract and other things. At the same time, she changed her diaper and fed her milk. However, the child was still crying. While Su Qingseng was in a mess, Hua Jinyao arrived. What's wrong? Why aren't you sleeping? When Nian Nian saw Hua Jinyao, she cried even harder. Seeing this, Hua Jinyao quickly reached out and carried the child over. What's wrong, Nian Nian? Why are you crying? The moment he carried Nian Nian in his arms, she immediately stopped crying. Her little face pressed against her father and she sniffed. With her head tilted, the exhausted little girl fell asleep just like that. So you've been making a fuss all this time just for you to come? Su Qingseng had always known that her daughter was clingy to Hua Jinyao, but she didn't expect it to be to this extent. Every night before going to bed, Hua Jinyao would come to see his son and daughter, especially to hug his daughter. Nian Nian stopped crying when she was in Hua Jinyao's arms. She looked at Hua Jinyao as if she had been wronged. Hua Jinyao hugged Nian Nian and gently patted her back, coaxing her to sleep in a low voice. Su Qingseng stood not far away and watched this scene. Even though she had seen this scene many times in the past 3 months, it still didn't stop Su Qingseng from feeling warmth in her heart. Hua Jinyao was really a good father. In fact, he didn't need to coax her for too long. Before long, she fell asleep in Hua Jinyao's arms. Hua Jinyao waited until his daughter fell asleep before he gently placed her on the small bed. Hua Jinyao told the housekeeper and the maid to be careful, then held Su Qingseng's hand and went back to the room. Not bad. Mr. Hua. As soon as they entered the room, Su Qingsang was not stingy with her compliments. You're becoming more and more like a stay-at-home dad. Thank you for the compliment. Su Qingsang shook her head with a smile and thought of something else. Speaking of which, your daughter is really clingy to you. It was just that he didn't go to see his daughter before going to bed like before. How could she cry like that? Jealous? Hua Jinyao put his arms around her waist and teased her. Yeah, I'm jealous. How could Su Qingsang not be jealous? I tried to coax my daughter for a long time, but I still couldn't coax her. You made her obedient as soon as you took action. I gave birth to this daughter. Of course I'm jealous. Su Qingsang was exaggerating. In fact, during this period of time, Nian Nian had gotten used to being hugged and coaxed by her father for a while before she fell asleep. Hua Jinyao picked Su Qingsang up and made her look at him. Okay, then I'll start coaxing you now, okay? Okay. Su Qingsang nodded and raised her head to look at Hua Jinyao. How are you going to coax me? Like this. As he spoke, he kissed Su Qingsang's lips. Su Qingsang hooked her arms around his neck and took the initiative to kiss his lips. However, when Hua Jinyao's hand moved down, she grabbed his hand and left his arms. She stepped back a little. Okay, I'll go take a shower. After a tiring day, she was covered in sweat. It's okay, let's shower together. He reached out to hug her again. Su Qingsang glared at him, then quickly left his arms like a loach. After entering the bathroom, Su Qingsang looked at herself in the mirror with mixed emotions. In the past 3 months, because of giving birth, she had gained a lot of weight before giving birth. Although her figure had recovered a little after giving birth, she looked even more voluptuous than when she hadn't been pregnant. When she took a shower, she stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself. Su Qingsang pinched the small circle on her lower abdomen that hadn't been completely eliminated in time. She looked a little depressed. What's wrong? Hua Jinyao, who had just entered the door, saw Su Qingsang looking at herself in the mirror. The expression on her face definitely couldn't be considered happy. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang wasn't usually such a lack of confidence. Logically speaking, she had given birth naturally and could recover very well. However, she was pregnant with twins after all, so it would take a little longer than ordinary people. Look at me, I've gained so much weight. He didn't know if he could recover. If he continued to be like this, he would really look ugly. How did you gain weight? Hua Jinyao placed his hand on her abdomen. Indeed, there was a small circle of flesh. I think this is just right. My hand feels much better. Hua Jinyao, I'm serious. I'm serious too. Hua Jinyao's hand moved up rather naughtily. He looked at Su Qingsang's face in the mirror and kissed the back of her neck. Especially the hand here. It doesn't feel too good. You, wife. In the past few months, he had been understanding that she had just given birth, and it was hard for her to take care of the baby every day. He had been a vegetarian for a long time. No matter what, don't even think about escaping today. I'm already like this. Su Qingsang looked at the flesh on her abdomen that hadn't completely disappeared. She was really depressed. She could have recovered better, but during this period of time, in order to let the baby have enough milk, she hadn't stopped feeding the milk soup. She ate a lot, so it would be strange if she wasn't fat. She even despised herself for being like this. Hua Jinyao looked at her, turned her body around, and looked at her very seriously. Wife, in my heart, you're the most beautiful. What's more? Hua Jinyao stroked her abdomen and looked at her figure, which was indeed much fuller than before. You became like this because of me. Do you think I would despise you? Su Qingsang didn't say anything. No woman could really not care about her appearance. But Hua Jinyao's words undoubtedly made her extremely happy. Hua Jinyao, are you serious? Wife, I will definitely try my best to prove it to you today. He stood up, easily picked her up, and walked to the bathtub. You're even more attractive to me than before you had a child. The annual Christmas was here again. Today was a little special. It was Su Qingsang's 3rd birthday after her marriage to Hua Jinyao, and it was also her 2nd birthday. After all, her birthday was written as the 26th. Last year, Hua Jinyao had planned to celebrate Su Qingsang's birthday, But Su Qingseng was pregnant and couldn't move freely. He wanted to take her out to play, but he couldn't. This year there was a chance. Hua Jinyao helped Su Qingseng apply for leave in advance. Then, he handed the two children to Lu Tongjia and Hua Mingguang. The winter in Rong City was getting colder, but Hua Jinyao was very excited. He brought Su Qingseng to the airport early in the morning. Where are we going? On the way to the airport, Su Qingseng was still a little hesitant. How many days are you going to take me? Xiang and Nian. Before she became a mother, she really didn't think she would have such a mentality. But ever since she became a mother, as long as she was away for a little longer, she would start to miss her two children. Every day when she went to work, she would hug her two babies for a long time before leaving. It was even more so when she came back at night. Under such circumstances, Su Qingseng really couldn't bear to part with Xiang and Nian. Wife. Hua Jinyao held her hand tightly. I know you can't bear to part with your two children, and I can't bear to part with them either, but we need some private time. No matter how reluctant he was, he didn't want to let Su Qingseng suffer. His son was very important to him, and his daughter was also very important to him. But Su Qingseng was more important. But, no buts. If I can bear to let go of Nian for a few days, you should also learn to let go and miss Nian for a few days. Su Qingseng's lips moved, but in the end, she could only listen to Hua Jinyao. When they arrived at the airport, they didn't go to the waiting room. Instead, they took the VIP passage and went straight to the boarding gate. Hua Jinyao wasn't in a hurry to get on the plane. Instead, he held Su Qingseng's hand through the huge glass wall. Actually, the gift I want to give you is here. So I want to bring you to take a look. What? What gift would be at the airport? Look carefully. Hua Jinyao pointed outside, and Su Qingseng followed his finger. There was a plane parked there. There were cyan cloud patterns on the white fuselage. Following the long cloud patterns, she saw 3 very eye-catching words on it. Qingseng, it's for you. Hua Jinyao hugged her waist and pressed his chin against her neck. Do you like it? Su Qingseng blinked. Even though she had received many gifts over the years, she had never thought that she would receive a plane one day. You, Hua Jinyao, aren't you exaggerating? I'm not exaggerating. Hua Jinyao didn't think he was exaggerating. Wife, with this plane, next time, you can fly wherever you want. For example, if you want to go to Lin City to see your mother, you just need to call Wenchang and ask him to arrange it. You can go back to see your mother at any time. That was too exaggerated. Su Qingseng turned to look at him. She was in a state of complete shock. Let's go. Where to? Didn't I say to go to Lin City to see your mother? Hua Jinyao told her his plan. We'll go to see your mother first, and stay in Lin City for a few days. Then we can fly to the Maldives or the Aegean Sea. You see, we'll go wherever you want to go. By the way, I bought 2 small islands in the Pacific Ocean. Why don't I take you to see them? Stop. Su Qingseng interrupted him. How many days do you plan to take me away? It doesn't matter how many days. Believe me, Mom and Dad will definitely take good care of the 2 little babies. So, you really don't have to worry too much. Su Qingseng wasn't worried, but she couldn't bear to part with them. Ever since the 2 children were born, they had never been separated from her for a day. Besides, don't you miss your mother? Yes. Li Qinxue often flew to Rong City to see the 2 babies when she was free. Not only would she come, but Su Qinghui would also come. But coincidentally, Li Qinxue and Su Qinghui seemed to have a tacit understanding. Except for the time when the children were born, and when they were 1 month old, the 2 of them almost didn't meet. Every time Li Qinxue was about to leave, Su Qinghui would come. Sometimes, when Su Qinghui was about to leave, Li Qinxue would come. The reason for this was, of course, because Li Qinxue didn't want to meet Su Qinghui, so she would ask clearly every time. After spending more time together, their relationship naturally became closer. Speaking of which, the last time Li Qinxue came to Rong City was more than a month ago. Su Qingseng really missed her a little. And sure, Mengwan, you said you wanted to see her last time. Did you forget? Yes, I didn't forget. Then let's go. Go spend time with your mother. and then spend time with your grandfather. See Mengwan and your former colleagues. Then, we'll find another place to fly to and play. Su Qingsing couldn't argue with him. She also knew that in the past year, from her pregnancy to childbirth to the birth of the child, she really hadn't had a good time to relax. Now that she was doing this, she could just treat it as a vacation. Speaking of which, this was her first time taking a private plane. It was indeed as comfortable as she had seen on TV. There was not only a living room, a meeting room, a study and 2 bedrooms on the plane. Su Qingsing sat on the sofa and looked at the wings outside. There were also 3 words on it, Qingsing. This was her plane, a gift from Hu Jingyao. It was a wonderful feeling. She had never thought that she would one day have a plane. Hu Jingyao. Thank you. Honey, you never have to say thank you to me. Hu Jingyao held her hand and said very seriously. I want to thank you. Thank her for appearing in his life. Thank her for bringing him a different life. Thank her for loving him. Thank her for fulfilling his life. Hu Jingyao. The moment the plane soared into the sky, Su Qingsing hugged Hu Jinyao's waist. I love you. Honey, I love you too. The Qingsing plane took the 2 of them to another city. It also witnessed the love between the 2 of them. Su Qingsing believed that they would definitely work hard and live a good life. Outer World Samsara 3 years later, Hua Yinjin climbed up the cabinet and rummaged around. She didn't find what she was looking for, so she pouted and climbed down from the cabinet. However, her movements were too big. When she got down from the chair, she lost her footing. She was about to fall to the ground. A pair of small hands quickly held her back and steadied her. Hu Yinjin turned around. When she saw Hu Yinjing, she smiled widely and jumped down from the small chair. Brother. Hu Yinjing hugged his little sister, who was about the same height as him, and put her down. What are you looking for? Hu Yinjin pouted again when she heard that. There's nothing left. There's nothing left. You're looking for this, aren't you? Hu Yinjing stretched out his hand, and there were 2 milk candies in his little hand. Wow, brother, how did you find it? Little idiot. Hu Yinjing opened one of the milk candies and put it into his little sister's mouth. I saw it when mommy hid the candy. Brother, you're so smart. Why didn't I see it? Stupid. Who told you to take a nap? You're the stupid one, Hu Yinjin replied, but she wasn't angry. The candy was so sweet. She opened the other candy in Hu Yinjing's hand and stuffed it into his mouth when Hu Yinjing wasn't prepared. Don't you want it? He knew that his little sister loved candy the most. One for you, one for me. As Hu Yinjing spoke, she looked around and finally made a shushing gesture at Hu Yinjing. We promised mommy that we wouldn't eat candy. If we only eat one a day now, mommy won't find out, right? Hu Yinjing said that, but when she finished eating the candy, her eyes began to blink again. Brother, I still want to eat. What should I do? You just said that you would only eat one. Then one more? Just one? Hu Yinjing looked at his sister's little face and helplessly took out another candy from his pocket. Here. Thank you, brother. Brother is the best. Cough. The sudden cough startled Hu Yinjing, and she almost dropped the candy in her hand. She and Hu Yinjing turned around at the same time and found that Hu Jingyao had arrived. Daddy, Daddy. The 2 little guys threw themselves into Hu Jingyao's arms. He stretched out his arms, one on the left and the other on the right, and picked up the 2 children. Tell Daddy, what were you doing just now? I didn't do anything bad. Hu Yinjin shook her head quickly. I was playing with my brother. I didn't do anything bad. You didn't do anything bad. Hu Jingyao blinked at his daughter. As she gradually grew up, her features resembled his, but there were still some differences. No. Then what is this? Hu Jingyao looked at his daughter's hand, which was still tightly holding a candy. However, her hand was too small. Even if she held it tightly, she couldn't wrap it completely. Candy. Hu Yinjin lowered her head, but soon raised it again to look at Hu Jingyao. Daddy, I only ate one really. Hu Yinjin raised 3 fingers as if to make a promise. When she saw Hu Jingyao's serious face, she leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. Daddy, I promise I won't eat it, okay? Don't tell mommy. Okay. Before Hu Jingyao could say anything, Hu Yinjing spoke first. Daddy, I found the candy. I gave it to my sister. If you want to punish me, punish me. But can you not tell mommy? The two little guys blinked their eyes at Hua Jinyao. He listened to their childish words and hugged their little bodies tightly. His eyes were a little hot. The familiar scene was happening again after more than 20 years. He buried his face in Hua Yinjin's neck and didn't say anything. Hua Yinjin was a little nervous. She glanced at her brother and then at Hua Jinyao. Finally, she said as if she was throwing away everything. Then if you want to tell mommy, can you ask mommy not to punish me? I promise I won't eat candy again, okay? Hua Jinyao shook his head and put down the two little guys. When he shook his head, Hua Yinjin's face fell. Daddy, I told you, I gave the candy to my sister. If you want to punish me, punish me. Hua Yinjin was quite manly. Hua Jinyao glanced at him and reached out to rub his head. Why would I? Don't worry. Mommy won't punish you. In this family, Su Qingseng definitely had a high status. She indeed didn't allow the children to eat too much candy, especially Hua Yinjin. The little ball from back then had now grown into a cute little girl that could melt a person's heart. She had a tooth decay, which was caused by her fondness for candy. Ever since Su Qingseng found out, she didn't allow her to eat candy anymore. However, Hua Yinjin just couldn't resist the charm of candy. Lu Tongjia, who was used to spoiling her children, would secretly put a few in the house from time to time. It looked like she was hiding it well, but in fact, the two children would always find it. Hua Yinjing, in particular, seemed to always be able to see where the adults hid the candy. Really, Hua Yinjin wasn't sure. She blinked her black grape-like eyes at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao was in a daze for a moment. At that moment he seemed to see Hua Wushuang's shadow. However, he knew that Hua Wushuang was Hua Wushuang, and Hua Yinjin was Hua Yinjin. He wouldn't confuse the two of them, but at that moment, he really felt that the gap in his heart that he had always thought had never disappeared was quietly being filled. His beloved little daughter had healed the wound in his heart in such a reincarnated way. She was his angel. He hugged his daughter tightly and stood up. Hua Jinyao looked at her. Nian Nian, but you have to promise me that you won't eat candy again until your tooth decay is cured, okay? Okay. If you promise me, I'll ask your mother to allow you to eat one a day in the future. How about that? Really? Hua Yinjin blinked her eyes in surprise. Then will Mom agree? Yes. Really? Don't you believe in Dad? I do. Dad is the best. Hua Yinjin kissed Hua Jinyao's cheek again. Hua Jinyao smiled. He held his daughter and held his son's hand. In order to thank Nian Nian for her trust in Dad, Dad will take you out to play today. That's great. Hua Yinjin clapped her little hands. Then brother wants to go too. Of course. Let's go. Hua Jinyao walked out with the two children. But we have to pick up Mom first. Let's go. We're going to pick up Mom. Hua Yinjin and Hua Yinjing got into Hua Jinyao's car together. The car stopped at the entrance of the hospital where Su Qingseng worked. Su Qingseng was on the night shift yesterday and only got off work this morning. When she came out of the hospital, she saw 3 figures, one big and 2 small, standing at the entrance of the hospital waiting for her. Su Qingseng smiled and quickened her steps towards the 3 people she loved the most. Nian Nian, think about it. Do you miss Mom? Yes. Yes. Did you guys behave when Mom was on duty last night? Yes. Yes. Really? Mom, I secretly ate a candy, but I promise, I only ate one, really only one. Mom, I gave it to my sister. Don't blame her. Why are you guys so disobedient? You actually secretly ate candy? Su Qingseng looked at the 2 little guys with a straight face. To punish you, huh? To punish you. You guys can sleep on your own today. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.